Welcome, listener or viewer. I'm Ian Kennedy, the host and creator of the Nothing to Gain podcast, a series of recorded interviews with influential protagonists from around the music scene over the last few decades. There's no agenda other than to enlighten, inspire, and at times, hopefully, amuse you. If you like what you see and want to support, you can do so by donating to the GoFundMe campaign by clicking the link in the video description. Please share with your friends and feel free to comment and offer your thoughts. Tres, dos, uno, and welcome, Daniel Demilew.
Hey,
how are you?
I'm good, man. Really good.
We've had a little chat beforehand, and Dan is probably one of the people on this planet that I've known for the longest, I guess.
Wow, since Halstow.
Since Halstow Primary School, yeah. I'm 40 now. How old are you? You're a year older, I think.
No, I'm 40 as well. So you must be quite old for your year, and I'm quite young. I'm a July baby.
Right, yeah.
So I think, but you're so 40 as well, man.
How was your 40th birthday? Because
Pushing on.
Mine was good, but obviously there were big plans for my 40th birthday, being a bit of a party head, which you couldn't do. It was impossible. How about yourself?
Yeah, same sort of thing. So Clara had this big 90s hip hop themed party planned in Colombia, and we've been priming people for like years, I think. And she'd been going like, make sure we can come to Colombia in what was it, 2020. Especially like, you know, because all these families have got kids now, so you've got to plan these things 2-3 years in advance. And it looked like a lot of people were going to come out, you know, people that matter anyway. And then COVID hit, which is really sad. I'll be honest, I'm a bit more low key these days. So I won't say I didn't want to party, but we ended up doing a dinner instead with a bunch of close friends in Dubai, and it was actually really, really nice. So yeah, it was a good moment. Yeah, it wasn't as spectacular, but it was still a special moment, and I was grateful for that, man. It was good. It was weird though, because of COVID, they had this table restriction. So I think we had, I don't know, 11 people or 9 people, I can't remember. But we had to sit on separate tables. That was a bit odd, but we just fudged it, man. It was cool.
Yeah, well, happy birthday.
Thanks, bro. Belated happy birthday to you as well.
We've made it. We made it.
And the other 20 birthdays we missed.
So yeah, just a little introduction. So Dan is a friend of mine from primary school and secondary school as well. We went through both.
Yeah,
all the way through. And in terms of this podcast, I'm reaching out to friends of mine who I believe have got things to say about music and music culture. And Dan, I remember at Dulwich, you started to lob around a cello, and you got one of these ties. Because at our secondary school, you'd get a tie for being special. And you were in the kind of the orchestra as a cellist.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's absolutely right. Look, it kind of made sense. I played the cello, even though I played the piano as well, which I preferred. I was better at the cello. And yeah, it just made kind of logical sense. I'm trying to even remember how I ended up in the orchestra. I think it was one of those things that one of the reasons I got into Dulwich was because I was all right at the cello. So I automatically had an audition for the orchestra. I don't think I even asked to be in it. I think they just went, "You're auditioning for the orchestra," and I played a little bit, and they let me in, and the rest is history. Yeah, that was good fun. I'm not knocking it. I had some great times in that orchestra. You know, we travelled to some cool places, Venice. We played in some cool spots like the Royal Festival Hall, and yeah, you know, I've got some memories from that. It was good.
You played in Venice, really?
Yeah, we went on tour to Venice. So that was kind of the highlight of that era. Yeah, it was good. It was, it was kind of part orchestra, part jolly, but it was good fun.
Yeah, you say you're not knocking it. I mean, why should you knock it? It was obvious at that age that you had this real talent for music, and with an instrument that my sister used to play the cello as well. You know, Trini, but she never got to the level that you did. And Dulwich was one of those places where you kind of got funneled into things that you were good at, regardless of whether you wanted to do them. But did you feel a pull towards music before that?
Yes, yeah, I think so. I'm just trying to cast my mind as to how. I think I've always enjoyed music. Just look, like you yourself, you start off by listening to music, right? You don't start off playing music; you start off listening to music. And then I think musicians, the difference between a musician and a consumer of music is when you start trying to imitate what you're listening to, whether that be a DJ playing other people's art forms, which is a form of imitation, if you like. You're playing the music, or trying to play the music on the instrument you've learned or re-sing it. So that's the point you become a musician. And I have to credit my mum and dad for bridging that gap, because I don't think I was trying to sing. I was never a singer. And mum and dad put me into the cello, and that's where I started playing music, and then eventually the piano as well. So that's how I started off in music. And I think you made a really good point about being sort of I don't know whether you use the word funneled in or channeled into a certain avenue of music. Yeah. Mum and dad definitely channeled me into the cello. I didn't pick it. That being said, I enjoyed it. And, you don't become disciplined and learn something unless you have a degree of enjoyment from it. The sound quality of the cello, the tone of it, I loved it. Some of the stuff that I used to watch with Jacqueline Dupre, I really, really was enthused by. And my teacher was a very good teacher. I think my comment around, there were some good bits in the orchestra and so on, was around, I wasn't really playing the music I wanted to play. And I enjoyed, it was okay, but I floated into the orchestra. I didn't choose it. It wasn't a great passion. It was just, it was okay. Yeah. Whereas the other side of it, and I'm sure you'll touch on this later, was when Dulwich built their music studio, which in those days was kind of, real state of the art and unheard of at most schools. When they built their music studio, I was like, I want to live here, So that's the difference. The difference was the orchestra was kind of led into it, and it was showed to me, and I turned up, and it was okay. But the music studio, I was like, I went straight to Mr. Ashcroft and said, tell me how I can get to this music studio. And it was interesting because no one was using it. And I ended up being kind of the only person using it for the first year, I think. So that was a long-winded answer, but worth talking about.
I'm all up for long-winded answers, man. I found through the course of recording these things, it's such a joy to listen to friends of mine talk about experiences and their perspective on things, because quite often as a performer or a musician or a DJ, you might be recognized for your name or what you've done, but not so much about, what you have to say or where it's all come from. And Richard, was it Richard Ashcroft? No, Richard Ashcroft is from the Verve, isn't he?
I can't remember his first name. It might have been Richard. Mr. Ashcroft.
Mr. Ashcroft.
It was Ashcroft. It wasn't Mr.
It was he looked like a musician.
He looked like a German conductor.
Yeah, exactly. Like he's born with a baton in his hand. So because I remember my first experience of Logic was in the music school in Dulwich, and trying to really basically program MIDI. So you mentioned before that parallel to learning the cello at that age, you were into playing the piano. And then you got the opportunity to start learning. I mean, just talk us through that. What were your first programs that you were learning, and what kind of what influences did you bring to it, and what did you get from it?
Yeah, so it was Logic, same as you. My first exposure to a studio was Dulwich. Up until then, I think I was doing stuff. The cello and the piano was very classical. Grades and that sort of well-trodden path in terms of how to learn music as a child. And I think I'm just trying to think. I was obviously into hip hop. I was into a lot of hip hop, and I was doing some stuff with Dean. Dean, mutual friend, and Dan Brewer.
Dean Morrison.
Dean Morrison, yeah, a switcher as he was called in those days, still is.
Yeah.
And Dan Brewer.
Yeah.
And we used to rap together, right? But it would there was no space to go rap together in Dulwich. We'd have to kind of sometimes it was a sunny day and we'd be out in the rugby field just spitting bars, and then other days we'll be in the locker rooms or something just spitting bars, right? I remember prefects used to kick us out because they're like, "What are you doing here? You're loitering." Well, no, we're not. We're musical. So there was no place to hang out and express yourself with that music until the studio was open, right? Because when that studio opened, Dan, I think it was Dan, turned around, because I was a rapper in those days, right? I was a rapper. I wasn't a producer. Dan said to me, "Mate, we need some music." And there was no YouTube in those days and stuff like that where you could just rip beats. They said, "We need some music. You play the cello, bro. Make us some music." And you got a studio there, $100,000 studio. Get up there and make some music. And I'm probably filling in some gaps here, but I'm pretty sure that's how it happened. He just went, "You're a musician. Get on with it." And so I got access to the studio through not through Mr. Ashcroft. He was dead against it. But there was the guy who was responsible for kind of putting it together, the tech head, and I forget his name, which I feel really bad about because he gave me my shot. He just wanted someone to use the studio because no one was using it. No one knew how to. And I got in there, they had Logic, and that's how I was introduced to Logic. And, I think these things are tools, I don't really care whether Logic's better than Pro Tools or Cubase or Ableton or whatever. There's enough in there for you to make number one hits. And that was enough to me to get my start in life making hip hop music. And we switched, that was it. We switched from the rugby field to the studio and made beats, and it was great fun. And I've been a Logic disciple ever since. Not a disciple in the sense that I'm like, "Oh yeah, Logic is the best program in the world." It's just, that's my canvas, man. That's what I learned. That I don't want to relearn anything else really, unless there's a massive advantage. And there isn't, from what I can see with these other tools. And they're all kind of roughly the same. So stick with Logic.
Yeah, I've just started to learn Logic in the last couple of years, really, because I don't produce music, certainly not to the quality that you do. But
not yet. I started before you, bro.
The power of the word "yet."
And do you know what? I bet. Sorry to interrupt. I bet you'll get there fast. I bet you'll get there faster than me, because, one thing I've noticed is DJs have a very, very good ear, right? A very good ear. And the art to production is basically a set of decisions based around, does this sound better or not? Does it sound good or not? And if it sounds better, you stick with it and then make your next decision. And you're making a million of those decisions, whether it's the note you play next, or the beat you play next, or the gap you leave between notes, whatever. They're all decisions. You're connecting these decisions at rapid pace. And your decision making as a DJ is going to be far better than mine. I promise. I've seen it a million times now. I've been around long enough. You guys have got a special talent for knowing what sounds good. So your only barrier, which I was better at, is that I know how to translate what I'm thinking into a note or a beat. And you might not have that if you haven't learned music. So that's your only barrier. And the minute you can get over that barrier, you'll actually be faster than me and get where you want to, probably better than me as well. And that's why people like Mark Ronson are just like geniuses, because they have a background as a DJ. Yeah, it's very musical.
I've always thought that producers make great DJs, and that has been evident, actually. I mean, certainly in like the tech house scene and a lot of the music that you hear in the clubs in Ibiza, a lot of these guys were actually ghost writing for bigger names, sitting in the studio and just churning out tracks. You suddenly put a trance producer or a techno producer on the decks, it's easy for them in comparison, certainly with new technology. But yeah, I appreciate what you said. It gives me encouragement there. I mean, I like to think that my understanding of music, and certainly of DJing, has come from a very analog world anyway. And I think that is probably the biggest bridge for me in terms of it's almost a lifestyle. Do you think that producing music is a lifestyle? I mean, is that your main thing still now? I mean, we're jumping quite ahead chronologically. I know you've got a family and stuff.
Can I just put you on hold and go back a second, because I've got a question for you. So
yes.
I like what you said about, I found that very interesting, you saying that a lot of producers became good DJs. And, you know more, this is more your world than mine, so forgive me if I'm showing my ignorance here, but take someone like, I don't know, Todd Terry, who's a producer and a DJ. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, right. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Which came first? Was he a producer first or a DJ first?
I think Todd is a real studio, is just a studio guy. He churns out music. I think he's producer first. And actually Nell did a track with him a couple of years ago. It's good, isn't it?
It is good, yeah.
It is good. And the thing is, I always liked Todd's records, and I used to buy them. So suddenly for my wife to be writing, asking me about her lyrics and then just suddenly going and recording this track with Todd was amazing. But stuff, I think he, as a DJ, just turns up and plays his own music and then makes his coin out of it. No disrespect to Todd at all, because I think he's a brilliant DJ actually. But I think that in that example, production came first. He found a sound and a beat that was, well, it was unique at the time actually. So it's a 4/4 side chains, sort of, lots of rhythm and then really thumpy bass lines, kind of a semi-speed garage, but New York.
But he kept the soul. That's what I liked about Todd. Like
vocals,
soulful vocal for me was. No, you're right. He pioneered it, and it's really interesting to hear you say that. I didn't know he was a producer first. I really didn't. So that's fascinating. That kind of estimates my argument.
I might be wrong. Todd, if you're watching this, please, fact check me. But I think possibly for him, the access to studios, because he's from the Bronx. He grew up in the Bronx. I think access to the kind of studios that you would need in the 80s to produce that sort of music is pretty limited, I would imagine. Maybe he did start out as a hip hop DJ and, that kind of thing, and then got access to a studio and then it took him in that direction. I get the sense that he enjoys producing more than he enjoys DJing.
Yeah. Okay. That's really interesting to know. Yeah. Very interesting. That would be that'd be an interesting thing to look at and work out, which comes first. But I definitely, there's a huge synergy. Like I would argue that the greatest barrier I've had in music has been the fact that I was taught the rigor of music, scales, and this note goes with this note, and this note goes with this note, and this note doesn't go with this note,
Okay.
That rigor is really good for playing classical music or whatever, but the minute you try to step outside classical music, where the rules are made to be broken, hip hop being one of them, jazz being another, let's say, then. And people don't realize that rules are being broken now because it's so kind of commonplace. But if you think about what the notes that were being hit in jazz compared to Mozart, right? It's real abstract stuff. And if you think about what hip hop was doing, around the Cool Herc era versus traditional disco and soul, like that was groundbreaking stuff. And for me, art is about breaking the rules in a way that's kind of aesthetically pleasing, in a disruptive manner. And the background I came from is dead against that. And that's a barrier I've always had to overcome, because I am naturally quite creative and I like breaking the rules, but then I've been schooled and disciplined for years. I don't think the DJ has that shackle. I think another example is Ray Charles, right? Ray Charles doesn't read music. Ray Charles listened to, I think it was like country and Western stuff and like old school R&B on the radio, and then tried to play it. And he just learned by listening to music and playing it. And that direct kind of short circuit connection with music is the holy grail, man. Whereas I think I had that somewhere in my heart, but that's not the way I learned. So it's always been a barrier for me. And that's what I'm trying to say with the DJ. I think you do have a short circuit straight to the music. Your barrier is perhaps that you can't play the piano, or you can't, play an instrument, whatever. And so, I have to overcome my barrier to make good music, and you have to overcome yours. That's what keeps it competitive, right?
That's a really interesting perspective on it, because I'd say anyone listening to this would think that a classically trained musician, I'm drawing a parallel maybe with like a classically trained chef, for example, would have all the tools and the knowledge and the theory to therefore go on and improvise and break the rules, as you say, and innovate. But to hear someone say that that's a barrier, I think that's an interesting thing for some people to hear. And like you say, with a DJ, for example, like myself, my only prerogative is to try and play something that pleases the audience. It doesn't really matter how it's been composed. And Ray Charles as a game changer, Stevie Wonder was an interesting one, which wasn't about a transition from classical music to jazz, for example, but Sam Cooke, who was a gospel singer, he was the best basically on the Chitlin circuit. And it was so controversial for him to actually sign up to a label that his first records wasn't actually in his name, because he was turning his back on the gospel church and that circuit and that culture.
Well, that was his decision, like as in he wanted to.
He was a bit of a player. He was getting a bit frustrated, I think, and a bit. And we've seen it as well in our lives in education. I was a bit of a rebellious teen, like certain personalities feel a bit suffocated by convention or what you're supposed to be doing. And there's a natural human instinct, I suppose, to sort of express yourself as a creative, regardless of the rules or the conventions. So Sam Cooke made a deal with the devil, if you like. He signed up to a label and decided to change his life. But he knew that in doing that, he was going to be offending and cutting off a lot of his history and the stages and the people and the support that had built him up. And he almost created the controversy in itself. And I like to think he paved the way as well, because I love gospel music. I think some of the best musicians ever have come from, let's say kind of early R&B, like you're talking about, up to soul in the 60s. And throughout that period, there were so many musicians that never really got recognized and so much hardship that went on. But the music itself stands up still, 60 years on. So let's go back to the Dulwich days. Like you say, you were doing a couple of tours.
Do you know, you made a good analogy with cookery, right? Yeah, you made a really good analogy around, you said, cooks, the best chefs are trained this, that, and the other. One of the best chefs in the world, two of the best chefs in the world, right? Never had a day's formal training in their life.
Heston Blumenthal?
Heston Blumenthal's one, and the other one?
Oh.
This was shocking. Ramsay,
of course.
Yeah. And do you know what? I saw some interviews. It was interesting. I saw some interviews where these, because especially, like, say it's the same with musicians, classically trained musicians and people from the industry are like, oh, I don't know what all this sampling is. And it's not real music and all this kind of stuff. They're stuffy because they want to protect their institution and the way they learn, because it's a threat, right? And I expected to hear the same things from chefs, but I saw some interviews, I can't remember what it was on, and they were all talking about their favorite chefs. And so many of them picked Ramsay. Not many picked Heston Blumenthal, because I think a lot of his marketing and showmanship, but so many of them picked Ramsay, and they said, you know what? We don't like him. He's a cock and he doesn't represent us well, but my God, he could cook. And they said it's just like pure, raw, natural talent. The guy's a sick cook and he's never had a day's training in his life. So you know, going back to your comment about being a bit rebellious or whatever like that, I think there are people who are insanely good at music and they're rebellious. You know, they're the Kurt Cobains, they're the Keith, what's his name, from the Prodigy, and people like that. And
Keith Moon? No, Keith Moon's from...
Keith Moon's another one.
Keith Moon's
another one. Another crazy.
Not Keith Moon from The Who.
They were the people that dared to do something different, be a bit rebellious, and they had the confidence to keep doing it when everyone said this is not the way to go. And therein lies the difference between all the talents that were discovered and the ones that weren't discovered. Yeah.
Mm. And maybe there's some others as well. I think probably we're doing quite a few musicians an injustice there. I mean, Shuggy Otis is a great example of a songwriter. I don't know who that is.
Who's that?
Shuggy Otis. He wrote Strawberry Letter 23, which Brothers Johnson covered. Mm-hmm. He wrote a track called Inspiration Information. He's a great guitarist.
Okay.
Really.
I'm gonna look him up.
Yeah. No, you'll recognize a lot of his stuff.
But you get my point. Like if chefs who don't want to like Ramsay are rating Ramsay and he's untrained, they're basically saying you don't need to train to be a chef. You know what I mean? You just need to express yourself. It's an art form, and I think the same with music. I think you don't need to learn scales to be a great musician. Yeah.
Who are your, if you had to, which is a really annoying question, but it's a proper DJ question. And I know, let's just clarify, Dan is not a DJ in any sense. He's a musician and a producer.
I wish I was, man. Those fuckers make a lot of money.
Honestly, we don't. Well, I don't. But some of them do, but not anymore. They're probably just waiting tables now, or like, in a car wash, or, sort of in a call center. David Guetta on the phone. Not making 80 grand a night anymore.
Get more girls, I'm sure.
Yeah. Unfortunately, they'll probably be back. One thing I would say on a little humorous point is one of the features of living in Ibiza is that throughout the winter, you see all the billboards, and we're talking billboards, right?
Yeah.
For club nights, right? So rather than having billboards for, I don't know, MFI or O2 or Vodafone, or, what you'd see in the UK, big advertising billboards. Here, it's clubs and it's DJs, right? So it's created this sort of mini industry for stylists and PR and management to take the best photo, if you like, of that DJ and just put their face on a big, and invariably they always look moody. It's always this kind of like, like, I'm not enjoying myself. This is serious, right? Now, I find it hilarious. And in the wintertime, they leave these billboards up because it's, they've rented them for the whole year. And it's still advertising, isn't it? Even if, the party's gone and you're going to have to slap another one up in May, they leave it throughout the winter. Now, this year, with none of the clubs open, you still have the same billboards from 2019 with some hilarious faces. I mean, haircuts, faces, fashion, names, just the names of the DJs are funny sometimes. Like, I mean, DJ culture has definitely eaten itself. And I think finally in 2020, it's kind of passed through. And I think what hopefully will be left are proper music lovers and not fame lovers.
Wow, that's powerful, man. I like that. Yeah. DJ culture has eaten itself. It's cannibalized itself.
Yeah.
Shit. Yeah.
Yeah. It's turned itself into sushi in a really wanky beach bar. Yeah.
Yeah, but not like sushi when it came out and it was cool, but like sushi in the.
That's right.
£2 sushi. Yeah.
Well, everyone did sushi,
Like the way Yo Sushi used to be high level, now it's like McDonald's. Yeah, I know the one.
Remember those restaurants where there was like actually a little conveyor belt, and it was so wow
expensive.
and expensive. Yeah. So let's. I'm going to stop babbling. I want to go back.
Sorry,
right?
no, I took you off on a tangent.
No, you can take me on any tangents, mate. Like, It's really great catching up with you and chatting. But I really would like to sort of, if I can, sort of divine some information and get some wisdom from you. So let's go back to, like you say, you were obviously classically trained in a couple of instruments, but then you got into making hip hop with our good friend Danny Brewer and Dean Morrison, right?
Yes.
So what influences in the hip hop scene were your key influences? Because I love my hip hop as well.
Yeah, for sure. Look, the huge one that comes to mind, which was big for me. There was like a big moment in my musical life, was because you got to remember the era as well. It's 90s, right? So 93, I think it was, when Snoop's debut album came out.
Yeah,
was huge for me because I kind of missed the Chronic. I was too busy listening to other stuff, and I wasn't exposed to the Chronic. My first taste of West Coast was Doggy Style, and that's my first taste of Dre. My first taste of kind of exposure to Funkadelic. I mean, it was sampled and replayed, but the Funkadelic stuff and Parliament and Snoop, and I was absolutely sold on it. I was just like, because it was musical, because there's a lot of hip hop which expresses where hip hop came from, which is from poverty and the ghetto and the struggle, and I get that. I get why people are attached to that, and I can get attached to that. I get that gritty vibe and the emotion and where it's coming from, but sometimes I'm just all about. I'm not listening to the lyrics. I'm just all about the music and what that's doing. So to hear the West Coast vibe come out, it was new, it was fresh, and it was a lot happier form of hip hop, and I loved it, man. It was kind of like, for me, it was kind of like what disco did to R&B, but in a cooler way, and that single-handedly was a massive influence on on the way I thought about music and just my love of hip hop as well, because I was into a lot of other stuff around that time. I was big into Queen, another very musical, experimental bands in terms of what they were doing within their genre. A lot of people didn't like what they were doing to rock because they were so experimental with it, and thought it was a bit too left of field. Well, I felt that's what Snoop was doing to hip hop, man. He really took it left of center, but he had enough style and class and street cred and skills to kind of make it okay and make it mainstream, and that blew me away, that album, man. I don't even need to talk about other albums because that had such a big impact on me. There were others. I was into Ice Cube's Predator album. I was into Redman, There Is a Dark Side. I love that. Actually, that was another huge influence on me, There Is a Dark Side. But There Is a Dark Side was something that I listened to and enjoyed, didn't understand and wanted to know more. It was like reading Tolstoy and not really getting it, but just going, this is something I should study. Whereas Snoop's album, I just put it on and I was like, boom, this is what I'm into. So yeah, those three influences plus Queen a bit earlier were probably the things that were really shaping my whole being in music around that time.
Yeah, cool. I mean, similarly to you, I missed the Chronic. The first 3 hip hop cassettes I bought were Snoop, Doggy Style.
Yeah. Everyone was into that, right?
Yeah, I mean, when it came out, Black Sunday and Onyx, Back the Fuck Up.
Back the Fuck Up, yeah.
But
yeah.
I was. I mean, you say you're into Queen, and this is going. Hopefully, people in Ibiza are going to be watching this. Freddie Mercury is a very welcome soul in Ibiza. He used to sort of treat this place as his home, and every single year, actually, in September, there's a party at Pikes Hotel for Freddie's birthday.
Oh, I didn't realise. So he had a place there. Like, he was there a lot, right?
He didn't have he might have had a place. I don't know that, but there's a hotel called Pikes Hotel, which is pretty legendary. And Tony Pike, who built it, he died a couple of years ago, unfortunately. But he was a bulletproof man. A cad and a bounder. The best kind of mischief. And he built a hotel around that spirit.
Around that vibe.
Yeah,
I bet that was a cool hotel to stay in, though. I bet it was all right.
Well, you can go to the reception and look at the photos. I mean, it's George Michael, it's Grace Jones, it's Kylie Minogue, it's Julio Iglesias, it's Freddie Mercury, it's David Bowie, it's Howard Marks. It's just, it's just a kind of a roll call of people who just are famous in the rest of the world, and then they can come to Ibiza and just check into Pikes, and there's no paparazzi, and it's just
it's like a Lake Como, safe space.
Yeah. And it's still there now. But yeah, they celebrate Freddie, so and interestingly as well, Nell's just been learning one of my favorite Queen tunes, You're My Best Friend.
Ah, great choice, man.
It's
that's an underrated tune.
Love that tune now. I mean, I find myself humming it all the time. So moving on to like Snoop and hip hop, I was into The Cure before I got into hip hop. I was a big Cure fan. And then because at Dulwich you sort of had to conform a little bit, I realized I was a bit of an outcast. I mean, not in your company, but in my year and stuff like that, and people were into their hip hop. That sound, that kind of remixed late 70s Zap, Roger Troutman, the sort of the vocal, that kind of stuff. It really fitted with this West Coast. It was gangster culture. I mean, let's not beat around the bush. I mean, this is when the Bloods and the Crips were shooting each other on street corners pretty regularly. And it was a good opportunity for a musician to rise above that and to sort of demonstrate, like him and Dre did, that, you can make a living out of this culture without necessarily being sort of dragged into it. Not everyone can. But yeah, that kind of era of hip hop, I think that was a changing of, it's almost like a new moon of hip hop, really. Like before that, because I now know, I didn't at the time, the protagonist would have been Run DMC and Public Enemy and, maybe EPMD a bit earlier, that kind of. Snoop added a musical element to it, didn't he?
You hit the nail on the head. It was music. There was something very, very, very musical about it, and you could tell. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong. When I slapped on a Snoop beat, I was just like, "This is heavy. Like, I'm into this. Whatever." I wasn't analyzing it in the detail. I'm not going to analyze it for you now. But I think somewhere deep in your soul, intrinsically, you were like, these guys know what they're doing. Like, they've got a deep understanding of music, and they've got a deep understanding of the history of music and what they're tapping into. And it's very deliberate. They haven't just fallen upon us. Because it was seriously good what they were doing. I mean, even, the test of a good tune is how good it sounds later on. And, that's why I always go back to things like House of Pain and who are the other dudes? Who are the smoked out dudes, man? Be Real, Cypress Hill.
Cypress Hill, yeah. And Funk Dubious, yeah.
Right, Funk Dubious, don't get me wrong. I'm not taking anything away from Funk Dubious. Legend. Seriously skilled, seriously talented, and what he did for hip hop is underrated, at least in the UK. I think he's more appreciated in America. But you slap on a Funk Dubious tune now, it sounds dated. Or no, date is a bit, that sounds derogatory. It sounds of its time, right?
Yeah, there were a couple. There are probably like 2 or 3 Funk Dubious tunes that transcend a bit. But you're right, Cypress Hill. But for me, do you know what? Dig them up, because I don't know Funk Dubious as well as you do. I probably only heard like the big, the commercial tracks. But for me, Funk Dubious, like I put him on, I can tell it's from a certain era, right? You put Run DMC, I can tell it's from a certain era. Yeah. And it's not, I'm not even basing this on the rappers. It's the sounds they're choosing and stuff like that. Run DMC had all those gated snares and straight from the 80s, man. The thing is, you can throw down a Snoop tune. That would almost drop now, right? And House of Pain's the same. You can throw down a House of Pain tune, and it's still okay. It's old school hip hop, but it still sounds relevant today. And then for me, the Kings was Cypress Hill, because what Cypress Hill did is they made their own sound, man. No one was making that sound, and when no one's making their sound, you make timeless music, because you can't say, "Oh, that sound was of that era," because it was only one band that was making. And
the closest thing I think we've got to that now is possibly the Neptunes or Timbaland. And yeah, look, their stuff will date, but I think there's a few tracks there that won't ever date. They're just completely timeless because they were so out of this world when they came out. Yeah, no, I've no idea where I started off on that tangent.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, like, let's feed it back into the idea of the producer, because the producer for Snoop's album was Warren G, and then he went on to make Regulate. So he was, and I think
hold on, wasn't it Dre? No,
Dre was part of it, but Warren G is Dre's cousin.
Warren G produced Doggy Style.
Well, he helped to, yeah.
Wow, there, mate. The beauty of these conversations, man. Like, I'm learning off you.
Yeah, and it was a guy called Muggs, DJ Muggs, who was the guy behind Cypress Hill.
Cypress Hill, yeah.
And he also was involved in Funk Dubious, because they were kind of two bands from a similar crew, you know.
Hey, you're like an encyclopedia.
Well, when you get me on certain subject, but behind the headliner, behind Snoop. I mean, Dre was the producer. Don't get me wrong, you know, but Warren G is very influential.
Interesting.
Be Real was the voice, you know, of Cypress Hill, and Muggs is in the background sampling this music. And what I found so different, what I look back on hip hop now, that early 90s period, they were sampling slightly different music to what the early 80s, you know, the Basketball Court Sound System, Grandmaster Flash, African Bambaataa, they were also sampling, and they were doing something a lot more skillful, actually. You know, they were mixing records and scratching and doing things that were a lot easier. A lot more difficult than just, you know, digitally sampling something and, you know, kind of looping it and treating it. But the music influence was different. And I found that is one of the greatest sort of testaments to hip hop music, is that it never really stuck to one style. It's always had its evolutions, and still today, you know, it doesn't take much for, you know, I like Talib Kweli and Mos Def in the last sort of 15 years. I think they're some of the best lyricists around. Their sampling it's the same thing, you know, it's just chopping a bit of music out and rapping over the top. But the style of what their music they're chopping out is really different. It's almost become a bit more sort of academic in a way, like, you know, trying to, like, Wu-Tang delved into old soul music and old kind of, you know, blaxploitation stuff and chopped beautiful little samples out of old soul music and then turned it into something very dark and quite aggressive.
Yes.
An amazing fusion. And it's almost like hip hop had reached its sort of, I think it's sort of come of age. What do you think about, I mean, I don't know any modern hip hop that I like right now. That's probably because I don't listen to enough of it. But do you think...
Or because we're 40.
Or because we're 40, yeah.
That's just what happens.
That's
man.
it. Of course. That's what my dad was...
better in the old days. You know what I mean? Like...
or also, when my dad was 40 and I was like, you know, 13 or something, he was probably just like, what's that fucking rackety? I would like to hear, you know, I always like to hear. I thought the Roots were really great, but that's even going back 20 years now, isn't it? You're right, the Neptunes.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting point. It's an interesting point. I think
I mean, are you making hip hop at the moment? Are you still?
Yeah, I still make the odd hip hop. I do, and I haven't really moved with the times. Like, I'm not making kind of like the type of beats that everyone's making now. I can do, but you know, I don't necessarily, and that's not because I don't like it. But so I was just pausing because I wanted to think about what you said. I actually think the kids now, I think creativity has come back into it. I really do. So the way, but I think the art form is different. I think the art form is less about a focus on, say, the quality of lyrics. Like, for sure, if you listen to like the lyrical depth of what's being said at the moment with a lot of these kids, particularly like the sort of poster of shallow rapping is mumble rap, right? If you look at that stuff, yeah, for sure, there's no depth to it. It's not, you know, it's not what Talib Kweli and the Most Def are doing. And but I think the art has been moved into another area of the music. So it's I hesitate to draw comparisons with jazz, but what I'm trying to say is it's become more improv. So a lot of these songs, they're messing with the structure, man. I mean, one of the things I've noticed, for instance, is that all rap tunes used to be 3 verses and 2 choruses, or 3 verses and 3 choruses, and used to last about 3.5 minutes, 4 minutes. That, you know, I can't think of many rap tunes that don't follow that format from the original era we're talking about in the 90s. But these kids now, they're busting verses without choruses. They're busting a couple verses and 1 chorus, and the tune's only like 1.5 minutes long, 2 minutes. I mean, and every tune is like that as well. It's really short, and they're messing with the structure of the song, which you have to give them credit for, because that is art. That's breaking the rules. You know, that's something you're not supposed to be doing. They've got tunes where there's no snare, or they've got tunes where there's no beat. They've got, you know, I think there's a level of creativity that perhaps we don't tap into as old timers quite as much, but I can start to appreciate it. I really can see it, and I might not like it, but I can, you know, it's kind of like modern art. You know, when you walk into a museum and you see a Jackson Pollock and you see all this paint splashed all over the wall, perhaps it wasn't meant for me, right? But I can't deny the creativity in that. You know, I can't deny that. It's just that perhaps I'm not able to look through a lens where I can relate to it. And I'm not supposed to relate to it because I'm a 40-year-old guy and this is made by 20-year-old kids. But I look at the level of creativity and I'm, you know, I take a different view. I think it's super high. I think it's higher than it's been in a long, long time. I think there was a peak, as you said, in the 90s where there was this amazing creativity, you know, pioneered by people like Tribe Called Quest, and even into the 2000s with people like Buster and Timbaland. I mean, those guys were just peak of creativity, and Neptunes and all them lot. And then I think it went down. It went down, and there was a lot of dross. You know, maybe I'm showing my age, but I wasn't really feeling the whole kind of Jeezy and Cameron and all them dudes. You know, I thought that was more about swag than music. But then for me, it's gone stratospheric. I think these kids are so creative, man. I think the music's so creative, and I look at like what someone like ASAP Rocky, he's pretty much a pop rapper. He's pop rap, right? He's trying to appeal to the masses. Go and listen to what he's doing with his music in the early days. I mean, it was like off the charts weird. And to see someone who's trying to appeal to an audience doing left field music, man, you're super creative, and I commend them highly for that. And I think the guy that started all that off, if you like, the wily godfather of that movement, of getting the creativity back into music and being experimental and taking risks, was Kanye. You know, Kanye was doing fairly what I'd say was regular hip hop, you know, an evolution of what was happening in the 90s and the 2000s, and he just did it very well because he's a bloody good producer, right? And he did that with Graduation and all those albums, just made a really good form of what was happening before. A derivation of that. But then when his mother died, he came out with the 808 Heartbreak album. And what the fuck was that? I don't know about you, but when I put that on, I was just like, what the fuck was that? Because it was creative, man. He was breaking new barriers. And the first time I listened to it, it was a hard listen. But now when you hear what all the kids are doing now, and when you go and ask them who their inspiration was, they talk about 808 Heartbreaks. You realize that this guy put the creativity back into, let's not maybe call it hip hop, but put it back into that genre, rap. Yeah, man, I think it's super creative. I really do. It's, you know, it's there's a lot of crap out there. But to be honest, there was a lot of crap out there in the 90s as well. But I think in the 90s, because we had that industry structure that didn't let you hear the crap, you know, they filtered that crap out and said, you're not going to hear that. We're only going to pick the cream of the cream. We're under the illusion that the 90s was perhaps a better era, whereas I don't think it was. I think there were just as many good creative people in the 90s and good quality hip hop as there is now. The difference is that any Tom, Dick and Harry can put their tune out on YouTube. Any Tom, Dick and Harry, you know, you don't need studio, you don't need a label. Everyone can self-produce and self-release. And that's why you're getting to hear all the dross alongside the good stuff. But if we had that industry structure of the 90s now, you would just hear the Octavians, you would just hear, you know, the Drakes, and, you know, like, Drake's a slightly different genre, but you know what I mean. And we will be saying, I think this is a highlight. I think it will be looked back on as a really creative time for hip hop. I really do. Yeah.
That's a nice sort of optimistic and positive spin on hip hop. I mean, I'll be honest and say that I've lacked enthusiasm for modern like rap form in whatever sort of musical genre it comes out at. I find some of it, for me, unnecessarily aggressive. But you know, this is coming from someone who bought Onyx Back the Fuck Up on cassette. You know,
doesn't get any more aggressive than, you know what I mean, Fredo.
They had Uzis. You know what I mean? Like they were photoed with machine guns. So yeah, I mean, that's a very hypocritical point.
But that's a really good point. That's a really good point. I mean, let's explore that more. So, like, what drew you to, I mean, you are someone who has a deep connection with music. So what drew you to Onyx?
If I'm honest, it was the fact that I'd heard Jump. It's called Jump. It wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd heard that when I had the rare opportunity to be in a group of people, you know, of my own age group at about 12, 13 years old at that school. You know, not my usual friends from back in Greenwich. These were like, for want of a better word, rich kids, right? Or you know, some of my best mates now, and you know a lot of them, they had older brothers or sisters that were into music. That hip hop was one of those genres that was breaking, and if you were 3 or 4 years older than us in 1993, you'd probably have access to more. And it was one of those. I like the sound. I like the kind of. I like the chant of it. Actually, I like the fact that there were like 4 rappers just sort of like bouncing off each other, and I didn't think about the content of what they were saying so much. Even though I knew at the time that this is quite controversial, what they're talking about. It wasn't what they were saying that was exciting me. It was the way they were saying it. And I think that's one thing about rap is it's both a form of poetry, but it's also a kind of rhythmic instrument, if you like.
Yes. Yeah, 100%. You've nailed it. It's an instrument. Your voice is an instrument, and it's legitimate to rap in another language that you don't understand, and it'll still sound all right. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. MC Solar, you know, I've got decent French, but I can't understand everything he says, but I know it sounds good.
And that's why I would carefully validate mumble rap, because they're using their voice as an instrument and a rhythm. And like some of mumble rap is literally like, you do not give a shit what they're saying.
So how would you describe to me what mumble rap is, or to anyone else?
Look, the archetype of mumble rap is probably Little Thug, is it? Little Thug, yeah. He's probably the archetype. Someone who literally just improvises on the mic with rhythmic and intonation. It's normally heavily auto-tuned. They like the auto-tune effect.
Right.
And the lyrical, you know, the lyrical content value is probably pretty low. But for me, it's interesting because I think there's a lot of crap that comes out of Little Thug, but there's a couple of tunes I absolutely love his verses. I really do. Like there's a third verse he does on a throwaway pop tune called "Throw Some More" by Ray Shremmerd, and he comes in on the third verse. He absolutely slays it. Like it is a brilliant verse, man. And he's got another couple of tunes where he does that. But I'd say there's 3 tunes I like by him, and the rest is just garbage. And that's where I come back to quality control. You know, it's Eazy-E's another one, right? You and me, we like Eazy-E, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, it was NWA's sort of great voice, and really, you know, Dre was in that band as well. But you know, he had a certain persona, I guess.
Yeah.
And that is personality is, you know, I'm virtually married to a singer. I often, she's a creative and a guitarist, and like all musicians, suffer occasionally, you know, sort of dilemmas of confidence and stuff. And I say to it, just remember, right, when we do all these gigs, you are the one holding that mic, right? So if you screw up, right, everyone hears it and everyone looks at you and it's like, you've screwed up. There's a lot of pressure on someone who holds the mic. And I think if you're going to try to sing about things or rap about things that have got political context, that have got emotional context, things that are commentaries or just fun stories, anecdotes, like, it's quite a big pressure, and the personality behind the person holding that mic comes through their voice. And Eazy-E just had that personality, and he died too young, unfortunately.
Yeah, but like, you know, if you watch videos of him in the studio, I mean, he was by any definition a pretty average rapper. Average is probably being kind. And yeah, and like you said, so there's so much more. And look, you nailed it. I mean, I'm just re-emphasizing your point. You nailed it. There's so much more to a performance, an artistic performance, than just the lyrics or just the sound of your voice. You know, Snoop, at the end of the day, it was his flow and his voice which was really the star, not so much the lyrical content. And you know, Biggie probably had both. He had the flow and the lyrical content, and then you've got other people who, you know, I don't know, Immortal Technique, who's a ridiculous level of skill, but perhaps it's not as an attractive flow to listen to. So, but they've all got their merits, and they're all valid artistic forms of expression. I think that mumble rap or modern forms of rap, you know, or just all the modern flows, you know, not even mumble rap, all the stuff that is currently in the mainstream, I think they're legitimate forms of expression, and there is really good examples of what they're doing. There's just a whole load of shit around it which we're allowed to see, which isn't filtered out anymore because of the platforms we have, social media and YouTube and all those things that we didn't have back in the 90s. So I think there was plenty of shit rappers in the 90s. You just didn't hear about them. You didn't hear. They weren't allowed to get through the net, you know?
They didn't get a deal, basically.
No, they didn't get a deal, whereas you don't need a deal now.
No, exactly. And there were very few, well, there were more independent record labels, certainly. You mentioned House of Pain, which I want to sort of come back to, because I just watched a little clip of Everlast. He's looking pretty well, although he's got a white beard now.
Was he talking about Spotify?
Yes.
Yeah, I saw the same clip.
You've seen it, right? Okay.
Yeah. It's a good clip. It's good. It's interesting.
Yeah, I think it is, and I think it, and it's something that I would want Nell to listen to. You know, about how if you're producing your own music and you're recording your own music, why do you need a record label now? You know, blah blah blah. Anyway, we'll come back to that. But yeah, like in the 90s, to be a rap artist or to be well known globally as a hip hop artist, you've already jumped quite a few hoops. I mean, you know, the budgets of those labels were probably spent more on, you know, rock bands from Liverpool than, you know, sort of, you know, look at British hip hop. You know, there's very few artists that managed to. Credits to the Nation was an amazing album they did, and Black Twang was really good. Bit later on.
Jest, let's not forget about Jest, man.
Jest
that guy
as well.
Was
Rodney,
born in the wrong time.
You know, Rodney was amazing, or it still is. In America, where there's much bigger budgets, there was more money thrown into hip hop, but a lot of those things came out independently. You know, and that's why people like Kanye and P. Diddy and they're so kind of like opulent and kind of like, look at my diamond rings, because they really did actually sort of build it up from ground level. I mean, you know, they made the effort to make the music and to say something, and then they converted it into a business. They didn't actually sort of go cap in hand to a major or, you know, suck anyone's cock to get there. You know, it
P.
was,
Diddy probably did, but
maybe. Sting. P. Diddy sucking Sting's cock. That's a horrible image. Isn't it?
Let's move off that image.
Yeah. So what I wanted to get to, right, is in terms of like the lyrical freedom that you're talking about and the lyrical expression now, mumble rap. It's a new term to me. Where are you positioned on what I call grime music, like UK MCs that I think have sprung from the pretty poor garage MC scene. I mean, garage MCs were never really that good, and I don't think there was ever really a place for them. Although drum and bass MCs, I think it's completely different. I think that there were some absolute geniuses, but it was a style that could go so far, and I started to lose love for garage music in the late 90s, early 2000s, when it kind of split from club music into something that was sickly sweet and
it was really girly, wasn't it?
Annoying to listen to,
all that shit.
or So Solid crew and Pay As You Go crew and all these kind of like, you know, kind of gangster glorifying. I mean, Onyx, okay, but still.
Wait, I haven't used that once against you. You're just like using it against yourself.
I am, because I don't want to be labelled as a hypocrite. All I'm saying is that first of all,
you're cannibalizing yourself.
Yeah. There we go. That's the name of the podcast. No, it's not. No, I just found that there was and certainly in London at the time. I think you were still in London at the time.
Yeah,
there was actually very real crime, danger, poverty, gang culture that was starting to get a little bit more, let's say, armed. You know, when we were young teenagers, we would go to Lewisham or Peckham or Clapham or place like that. You know, if you got mugged, or if someone got mugged, a knife was a really kind of like, whoa. But then it started to get, guns started to come out. And I believe that, you know, American gangster rap had quite a lot to do with that, because British culture is always kind of piggybacked on or kind of been that sort of admiring, I guess, admiring what American culture's got with its weight and its kind of impact, and British music culture has kind of admired it, certainly on that kind of scene. Although drum and bass and garage and acid house and things like that, I know that these are separate cultures. When grime started to become a word, and the MCs that were making that music started to become well known, I just thought, we've really lost the point here. Like, music isn't there to make people feel angry and aggressive. I mean, certainly it should be there to vent frustration. I mean,
there's nothing against you in a minute.
I know. Yeah, but I guess it was a shame for me to see the generation that was following up. And I'll be honest about this as well. Like, you know, I got into hip hop. You know, I'm a white boy. You know, I'm an Irish white boy. I got into hip hop because it's just, you know, because why everyone got into hip hop. You know, but I did find that growing up, there was a sort of glamorization of the ghetto. You know, like the gangster style. You know, the kind of fuck you, I'll shoot you sort of attitude, and that actually started to transcend into culture. And I thought it was a shame for that generation to get stuck with this form of music that tries to be discordant, is not arrhythmical completely, but it's not a natural rhythm. It's not a disco rhythm. It's not a funk breakbeat. It's not like a nice 4/4. It's kind of a, you know, it's kind of deliberately not easy to listen to, and then have very aggressive, you know, mean sort of, kind of blokes just kind of shouting about, you know, how nasty they are. I just find that a bit of a shame. In terms of the music you're making now, right? Have you got any aspirations for it as a cultural medium, or is it just music you make for yourself?
Wow, man, that's a deep question. I think the short answer is no. Like, do I have some sort of great goal that I want to use my music to express? Do I think like that? Like, do I want to have that? Perhaps, maybe. But do I genuinely think like that when I sit down and make a beat? No. And I think that stems back to the lens I look at music through, which makes me a producer, is that I fundamentally listen to the music first, not the lyrics. And interesting enough, I've always been accused of being a bad listener. Part of that probably is just I'm a bad listener. And then part of it, I think, is also just the way I digest expression, someone else expressing themselves is the non-verbal piece. So, I analyze how they're moving, what their mood is, all the sort of non-verbal cues. I think I'm more tuned into that. And then with the music, it's the same thing. I'm more tuned into the music and everything that's around the vocal rather than the vocal itself. And the way I analyze the vocal is coming back to what you said, which is I analyze it more as an instrument, which is why I like my favorite rappers have flows. It's not the lyrical. Yeah, don't get me wrong. I appreciate Mos Def and Talib Kweli. Like, those guys are sick, and I can see why they're revered. I mean, I totally appreciate their talent. But my favorite rappers are Slick Rick, would have to probably be my number one, right? And a lot of that is his delivery. He was very clever with what he said as well. Don't get me wrong, but it was his delivery, which is smooth. So you understand what I'm saying? I'm analyzing the sonics. I'm more analyzing the sonics than the content. The older I've got, the more I've come to realize how fucking more amazing music can be when the content is good as well, right? But it's not enough for me really just to have the content right, the lyrics right. For me, I want the full package. So I don't just want good music and good content, but I want good music and good content to relate to each other. You know what I mean? Like I love honey and I love cheese, but honey and cheese is not a good mix. You understand what I'm saying? So for me, it's kind of like, it's got to be the full package, that every element of the music has to complement each other sonically. And then if you can do all that, get it all homogenized and harmonized, not homogenized. If you get it harmonized and you got the full package, and then there's like a bigger message around it. I mean, like that for me, then you're the holy grail of music, right? And there's not many people who can do that. I think I'm just, I'm racking my brain. And no one springs to mind immediately, but yeah, Public Enemy had that occasionally with some of the hits, where they, a lot of Public Enemy is just kind of Chuck D ranting around his very admirable political stance. But every now and then he had an amazing track which was very political, but also had like Flavor Flav interjecting with just some bullshit lyric, which didn't mean anything, but just fucking was popping. That for me is what, like, the holy grail of music is, when everything has to be complementary. It can't just be good on its own. So the short answer is no, I don't really set out to do something that a higher purpose with my music. But the older I've got and the more I think about it, and I would say this wasn't my instinct, this is just something I'm learning about. The older I've got, I find it hard to, I made a track recently. I was just mucking around. I think I was high and I started spitting again. I haven't spat for 20 years or something, or 15 years. And I started spitting and I made quite a funny rap. It was all right. It wasn't that bad. Like, my delivery is not great, but the elements were there. But it was, a lot of it was, kind of very snoopified lyrics, should we say. It was very doggy style era, talking about chicks and what you might do with them in a certain situation. And yeah, and actually, even at the time, it was cool when I made it, and I stand by that piece of work as a piece of art. I didn't feel comfortable with it afterwards, because now I've got a daughter, and I just like, I don't know, man. This is kind of, I'm not wholly subscribed to the fact that kind of hip hop influences and makes us misogynist. I don't believe that. I'm not a misogynist as a result of listening to hip hop, but I just didn't feel comfortable with it. I think words, do cast an image and a spell. It's called spelling for a reason. Words cast spells. I think words can affect people. I'm not particularly affected by words because I'm not built like that, but I think they can affect people. And therefore, as a more responsible adult these days, perhaps because I've had a daughter, I think a bit more carefully about what I'm getting myself into in terms of when people have put lyrics over my tracks. But other than that, mate, to be honest, I'm just all about the music. A good tune is a good tune. That's it, period for me. And when I sit at my laptop to make a tune, I'm just like, I'm going to make a good tune right now. What? And I try and feel my way through it, not plan it. Not plan it. And that's just me. That's just the way I do it. You know, someone like Kanye, I think is a bit different. I think Kanye does plan his stuff a lot more. And his genius is that he's able to plan it in a very logical way and still get the vibe, like just loads of vibe along with it. And that's why he's such a genius as well with what he's doing. So yeah, so sorry, mate. I wish I was a bit deeper, but I'm just not. And you know, but that doesn't mean I can't recognize and do that. I can do that if I put my mind to it. I'm not here to change the world. I think if I was super famous, like if I suddenly blew up, I would do what Kanye did with 808 and Heartbreak. So I'd go, do you know what? I'm super famous now, doing all this music, and now I have a license to do something completely out of the box, and I'm going to do it. And it's going to have a higher purpose and all that. I definitely would do that. But at this stage, no, man, music's a hobby for me. It's not you know, I don't live off my music. I make pocket money off it, which is cool occasionally. And I pick and choose the jobs I want because I like them, and I throw away the other ones because I don't like them. And it's a hobby. And I don't want to get too, you know, hung up on a higher purpose and what am I doing here. I just want to make good music.
Yeah, I mean, that seems completely consistent with your history, really, as you're a musician, like you said. I mean, we mentioned Dan earlier. He was maybe more of a lyricist. I mean, whenever I saw you two perform it, Dan Brewer wasn't behind a keyboard, you know, or behind a laptop. You were. I just there are quite a few things that sort of sparked in my mind. First, it just reminded me of a thing about Flavor Flav, who I love.
I do as well.
Do you know one of the most hilarious things that ever happened on British TV?
His TV show?
No, he was on a show. I think it was called The Farm.
You should check that out, though, mate. It's good TV.
Well, yeah, I bet it is. I mean, you know, a man who wears a clock around his neck is. You've got to listen to him. I mean, you've certainly got to ask him you've got to ask him the time occasionally. I mean, he clearly wants to tell you what the time is. But he, I don't understand. It was one of those, like, you know, Celebrity Big Brother or I'm a Celebrity, one of those, you know what I mean? People get paid to go on it. But I turned on the TV one evening, Channel 5, and I, do you remember Keith Harris and Orville? You know Orville? Yeah, right. So Keith Harris was sitting down with Orville, just in an armchair, looking quite worried, like. And it soon became clear that Keith was getting berated by someone. So the camera turns around, and you've got Flavor Flav standing above him, and Ron Jeremy.
Orville the duck.
Yeah. So Keith Harris is sitting there with Orville, right?
Yeah.
And he's basically being told off. That's my cat Earl, by the way. Say hello to Dan.
Hey, what's going on?
So Ron Jeremy of 70s porn star fame, and Flavor Flav happen to be on the same TV show. I've no idea why.
I'm YouTubing this straight away after this interview.
I hope you find it. Everyone should see this. But I turned off. I think I turned the TV off because I was like, it can't get better than this. You had Flavor Flav looking at Keith Harris going, "It's not about you, Keith, and it's not about Orville. It's about the man behind Orville."
He was probably high, man.
He probably was.
Yeah, for sure.
But what you had, right, was Flavor Flav and Ron Jeremy having an argument with each other because Ron Jeremy's trying to stop Flavor Flav from bullying Keith Harris, right? So Ron Jeremy and Flavor Flav are having this sort of like spat. And then who breaks it up? I shit you not, Lionel Blair.
What?
Lionel Blair comes in, break it up, lad.
Mate, this sounds like TV gold. I'm
It
looking
is.
this up.
It is.
I'm looking this up straight. Do you know what? I need to look this up now. No, mate.
Like I say, it's the best thing that's ever been on British TV. So another thing, right? Just very quickly, because we got.
No, mate, I've got all the time in the world, by the way.
Yeah, cool.
I'm really enjoying the chat as well.
Me too, man. Yeah, I really. And do you know what, Dan? You look. I mean, you don't look 40, mate, do you? I mean, you've sort of drank from the fountain of eternal youth, haven't you?
Black don't crack. I'm lucky I've got that side to my genes.
Yeah,
mate, you're looking good yourself. You look.
I'm all. Yeah, I mean, like Nell mentioned it the other day. She like looked at me.
Pirlo's love child.
You haven't got. Yeah, there you go. I'm Pirlo's more talented younger brother.
Yeah, mate, you're good at football, to be fair.
It was a very complimentary comparison to me. I guess I like to think that I played football with a similar style.
Mate, you were dope football. I remember you were dope, man. You were really good.
I've not played in a while. I've had some sort of pretty horrible injuries the last 10 years. Not from football, but my back's broke. But yeah, I still like to smack a ball in the net. Yeah, we'll talk about football. Do you know what I wanted to just quickly mention, because you were talking about the lyrics not being necessarily as important as the music. And
not as important to me.
Yes, to you.
To other people, I get it, man. It's important. Right.
That's important. Yeah. I should just clarify that. One band who I think were so unique in the hip hop scene for not only each of their voices being completely different, but their lyrics and the style of tunes they wrote with Pharcyde. Yeah. And like, I still listen to Pharcyde tunes from the early 90s and think, it's a bit like Tribe Called Quest. I don't know that anyone can do. It's a bit like listening to Curtis Mayfield or Sly and the Family Stone or Al Green, or, it's like no one can touch that. That's just, that is classic music. So I just wanted to remember to sort of mention it.
No, I'm with you. And look, I missed out on Pharcyde as well. I think because you know what it was, I wasn't a slave to any particular genre. Yeah, I've always kind of stuck around hip hop and soul for a long time, but I was never a slave to a genre. And I tried to keep my taste as diverse as possible. I was just like, good music's good music, you know what I mean? And therefore sometimes I missed, some major influences in each of these genres, and Pharcyde is one of them. And you listen back to it, I saw it retrospectively when I was older. You look back at it and you're like, this is tight, man. I mean, it's like Dilated Peoples as well, who I kind of discovered late. I was like, yeah, this is really, really, really tight, really tight. Really well crafted. That's the word. It's just really beautifully crafted music.
It was original.
And
the music wasn't sampled.
And it had a vibe.
Yeah, personality. No samples. This was their music.
Really, they didn't use samples.
They maybe used a couple, but if you go through their albums, I mean, I've not heard the originals.
No, mate, I genuinely don't know, because as I said, Pharcyde missed me. But I respect their craft. I could hear it. I could hear how good they are. And I think one of the things I like about, which we haven't touched on and we probably should have, because I think coming back to say the newer forms of hip hop that perhaps you're not quite so complimentary about. For me, the differentiator between good and bad can often be authenticity. And what Pharcyde had was authenticity, right? Massive authenticity. And what all those other artists were talking about had was authenticity. And sometimes that authenticity wasn't necessarily where they come from, or what, like Kanye is not ghetto, he's middle class, whatever, right? But what he did is he said, right, I'm going to become this guy and I'm going to sell myself 100% into it. And I'm not going to give it up in 2 years. This is going to be me. And I think that's okay as a brand of authenticity, because you know that's when your real art comes through, when it shines. And the ones that get found out are the guys that are jumping on the bandwagon. And that's why I know Farside are good, because you can hear it. It's just authentic, man. It's so authentic. And most Def's in the same boat. Tahlequah's in the same boat. And yeah, so that's definitely worth mentioning. And I totally agree with you. I wish I'd listened to more Farside at the time. Like, I feel like now I'm listening to them, I don't appreciate them in the same way that I would have appreciated them if I'd listened to them. Listened to it at the time.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, as a teenage boy in London, to hear Bizarre Ride 2 was just like, I mean, I was more into them than I was to a Tribe Called Quest or De La Soul.
Mate, do me a playlist. Can you send me some, like, what I should listen to? That's.
Oh yeah.
Apart from the hits, because I know that.
But it's like what you say. Music hits you at a time in your life. There's a historical context really to a tune, and you know, without wanting to sort of steal the airwaves here, you know, a lot of my record collection, a lot of tunes that I love to play, I can almost remember when I first heard it.
Yes. Yeah, 100%. Look, and you know where like the best music for me, the most successful music is, because you're absolutely right. And the problem with that, there's a problem with you attaching that memory to that piece of music, is that you're gonna like that tune and probably overinflate how good that tune is and how important it is to you as a result of your personal experience, not the music, all right? And no one else can tap into that unless they've been in your shoes or had that same shared experience, right? But very occasionally, what you do is you select a tune as a DJ that a lot of people can relate to that experience, and that piece of music goes interstellar. And I'll give you a very good example of someone that I think did that very, very well, was the Streets. All right, he was very poppy, and I get that, but I think what the Streets did was make music about situations in life that, you know, a large section of the community could relate to. And we were like, yeah, man, exactly. Because it evoked memories. It wasn't just emotions. Everyone goes on about music needs to evoke emotions. Yeah, I get that. That's important. But if you can evoke a memory, if you can evoke that, oh yeah, I remember that was when I was in Ibiza on the beach with this set of people at this particular time. And man, that is powerful. That's fucking powerful.
Yeah.
So that's a very good point.
Yeah, if you know,
blessing and a curse.
There are so many chapters of my life or moments in my life that I can associate almost specifically with a certain tune. And
give me like if you had to just pick one tune and one moment that just sticks out in your brain now, I've asked the question without you thinking too hard, what would it be? And what was the experience? It
was already there. Like, I mean, no, when I realized what you were asking. So there's a track called Could Heaven Ever Be Like This by Idris Muhammad. It's a really sort of laid back sort of jazz funk tune, but really, really uplifting sort of builds. And I played it at a villa in San Rafael in 2004. I was basically out in Ibiza for the first time DJing with a promotion from Brighton. And we had a villa party at the end of the week, and it was lots of electro house and house. But by about 4 a.m., 5 a.m., when all the DJs had sort of, you know, they'd played their set, and, you know, there quite a lot of, I remember being like, I've heard this about 3 times tonight. I jumped on, and I had all my CDs, but it was all hip hop and reggae and funk and soul, and disco and stuff like that. And I just basically, people really like the change of vibe. It's a good story to tell this, actually. By sunrise time, about 8 a.m., I was playing around a pool, and I couldn't see many of the other people. I just assumed they'd gone inside, you know. So I went back into the kitchen, looked around, there's no one in there. And I'm like, it's a bit strange. I'll just fix myself a drink, sort of go outside and, you know, keep playing. And then something...
Hold on, baby, I just want to ask something. So, like, you're in the middle of a DJ set, and, like, once the tune's dropped, you go out and make a quick drink and then come back.
Yeah, I must have put something on just to sort of... Because, Because at that point, right? I mean, there were probably only about 20 people there at that point of the morning, but I couldn't see them. You know what I mean?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
you know, whack a tune on.
Anyway, carry on. Sorry, I
So,
interrupted.
you know, they might be on the roof, they might be inside, whatever. So I fixed it. I came outside and I'm a little bit wonky and I'm kind of looking around, go, what's going on here? And then I, oh God, I heard this little giggle, like a hee, like a kind of really mischievous giggle, and then a rustle in the bushes. And then this naked man just like ran out of the bushes and just like cupped his balls, held his nose, and just bombed it into the pool in front of me, right? And I was like, what's going on here? And then I heard a big raucous laughter, right?
Right.
And I just put on Idris Muhammad, right? I just put on Could Heaven Ever Be Like This? Because in my mind, I was in heaven. I was in Ibiza. I knew I had to fly back in about 48 hours, but I was suddenly playing my music in a field in the middle of nowhere to sunrise. I was like, I'm not going to let anything ruin this. So I put it on, and then a bloke just comes in and sort of bombs into the pool. And when I heard all the laughter, I realized that people were on the other side of that hedge. So I walked around, and everyone had moved all the furniture from inside the villa into the little patch of land next to the pool behind the bushes, and they were all watching the sunrise, sitting on sofas and chairs and stuff. And I came round, and everyone just started like fucking clapping. And
so they'd all been chilling and to your stuff anyway. You just didn't realize.
Yeah.
That's nice. That's a beautiful moment, man. And the quote you need to take away from that and put in your epitaph when you die, man, is, and I leaned back and I thought I was in heaven. I love that, man. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it was actually that moment that pretty much decided that I was going to move to Ibiza.
Oh, right. So there was a seminal moment in your life as well as a kind of, an iconic anecdote.
Yeah, I think when that moment happened, I didn't really have any more, I guess there was a bit of a battle in my life between like, that's crazy, moving to Ibiza or doing something like that's crazy. There was a bit of a sort of sense of reason on this shoulder. And when that moment happened, I kind of felt like you don't get a chance like this, in your life. This is not many people get to do that, feel that way. And certainly because I'd been to Ibiza 10 years before and I, dreamed of being a DJ, that I suddenly did that. It was like, right, this is the right place for me. Yeah.
That's an awesome story, dude. Really awesome story. Love it.
Yeah, and thank you to Stuart and Benji and Chris and Dan and all that lot.
Mate, and it's amazing because every time you hear that tune, it's gonna evoke that memory. Like, that's so cool. Straight back
to that moment.
Yeah. And it's like I want to go and listen to that tune. I don't know whether you're able to kind of disassociate yourself with that emotion now, but do you know if that tune is a really, really, really good tune, or is it a decent tune that is made amazing by the experience you had alongside it?
Oh no, it's incredible. It's a beautiful, beautiful tune. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. No, because it was interesting because I had it's not a unique moment like that, but there's one tune where it was like the tune of the summer. I went on holiday to Portugal and had a really good time with a bunch of mates. And the tune that was always coming on, which was a good tune anyway, was Britney Spears' Boys. And I never thought I'd been to a Britney Spears tune, but it's massively attached to that memory. It's a guilty pleasure. I was like, that tune's fucking heavy, man. Seriously.
I really
I'm not afraid to bubble it.
Yeah, good for you. I know you never would be. I love your complete impartiality and complete lack of snobbery about music, because I'm a proper music snob.
Yeah, but you know what? There is Neptunes did the music, so I'm sure that had a lot to do with it.
Oh, did they? Okay. Yeah.
Neptunes did it. It was when she grew up and Neptunes did the beats. But
right,
mate, I love that memory though. Yeah, because I totally love that memory, man. And like, yeah. Does this ever happen to you? Like, for a tune like that is clearly like, up there in your mind, in terms of what it means to you and its importance. Do you ever like, play that tune in an environment where perhaps other people don't tap into it the way you do, and then that you find that really disappointing? Does that ever happen? Or do you just like, you're like, no, I'm playing this for me, fuck it?
Yes.
Or does everyone love it because it's a great tune?
No, I think it's the sort of tune it needs a certain type of audience. I think for most, I use the word conventional a lot, and I know it's quite a general term, but if you're trying to describe audiences, I think for a conventional audience, it's a bit too, you're digging up your jazz records here, Ian, that sort of thing.
All right, okay. Indulgent. It's indulgent.
Yeah, but to a different audience, like a kind of Balearic beard strokey audience, it would be celebrated, but then I imagine, because Balearic beard strokey DJs are incredibly bitchy, they would be like, oh, that's really obvious. Why didn't you play the other thing by Idris Muhammad or something, It's a bit too familiar.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, there's that kind of cultural, I call it cultural capital.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I want this to be so obscure that no one knows about it, that like it's my thing. And I told you about it. Yeah, I get that. I hate those fuckers, man. Like culture wasn't supposed to be hoarded and capitalized. Fuck that.
Yeah.
It's meant to be shared.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, man. I mean, I love that about you, that you're really kind of to the point, and your words don't come from there's no bullshit, right? And yeah. I've just admitted I'm a bit of a music snob, and I'm guilty of that as well. Like as a DJ, there's an element of competitiveness where you think, I've got a tune that I don't think anyone else has got, or I'm going to drop this and I'm going to get a bit of a kick if the DJs I know in the room are suddenly like, "Oh, what's this?" There's that little bit of an ego stroke. But one thing you said to me, Dan, which is honestly,
I might be unfair though, because that's your job. So maybe you're allowed to do it.
It's not always my job. Sometimes it's my job to play a wedding set for people that want to hear wedding tunes. But you said to me once, and it really sticks in my memory, and I absolutely agree. You said, "I fucking hate middlemen." I think, you probably don't remember saying it. It wasn't like, it wasn't, it just...
I wonder what was the context? Because I think my view might have changed. But tell me what the context was. Do you remember?
I don't know exactly. I don't know exactly the context. I think it was probably music related.
Okay. Yeah, no, I do get it. So for me, like, I think if you're going to get involved, add value, right? And if you're the type of middleman that can add value in terms of being able to sell, because that's a skill, man. That's a skill not enough musicians have, which is why there's so many starving musicians, right? Because they're skilled at making music, but they don't know, anything about marketing and sales. So there's value in that. You need to sell more of your music, and this guy knows how to sell music. Value. I don't call that a middleman. Or if there's a lawyer protecting you, fine. That's that. You're adding value to the chain. I don't mind that. I've got no problem with those guys at all. Worth their weight in gold if you find a good one. But the guys that come in and don't add any value, because whatever you were doing, whatever transaction or whatever you were doing was going to happen anyway without them. And they try and take it, and they try and make themselves useful to you so that they can justify taking a cut of what you're doing. Fuck those guys, man. They're leeches. They're leeches, and there's a lot of them. And they're smooth talkers, and they know how to. I wouldn't even say make your life easier, because making your life easier is value. I get, if you can make my life easier by taking a ton of stuff off my plate, there's value in that. Fine, you deserve a cut. But what they do is, I think they give the illusion of making your life easier by making your life more complicated and then solving that complication. Well, all you did was bring me back to square one, motherfucker. You're not adding any value. Get out. Those are the middlemen I hate. Yeah.
Yeah. And me too.
Yeah.
One thing that has
and there's a lot of those in the music industry. There's a lot. You know?
Well, I was going to say, probably not anymore. I think the last year is going to be a massive cull for those people. I can reference about 11, 12 years ago that a big music summit conference started in Ibiza, probably influenced by the Miami Music Festival and the Amsterdam dance event. So Pete Tong and a group of other people on the island here, I mentioned Pete Tong because he's the most familiar name, but they decided to do their own summit, you know, back to business, I think was the tagline to start with. And I went to the first one. There was probably about 200 delegates, I think, and it was mostly press. Really interesting talks. I mean, Francois Kevorkian did the keynote speech. It was really like, I was there, like just arrived in Ibiza thinking like, wow, like I'm in sort of a press conference with Francois Kevorkian. This is learning from, it's almost like Yoda, I want to say. But in the last 10 or 11 years of going to that event, you could see with social networking becoming more prevalent that more and more middlemen, more and more service provider, agent, I'll manage your conversations. We're Twitter experts. We've got link ups with lots of festivals and we can sort of plug you into tours. And you suddenly realize that when there is a massive gold rush, which dance music was at that time, you suddenly get that kind of character and those businesses sprouting up. Now, the actual foot soldiers themselves are only culpable in that that's what they've chosen as the step up the ladder. It's the business owners that probably the ones that should take more more flack really from just sort of trying to exploit the kind of supply demand element of dance music, which dance music has never been a kind of production line or it's kind of a strange commercial aspect that was put on it. I would say
sucked the life out of it.
Yeah, well, it did. I mean, and then Facebook, and suddenly someone can become famous and have billions of followers even though they can't mix a record and blah blah blah. I would say that last year has probably, and I certainly hope so, sort of brought the end to quite a lot of that crew. What are your ideas about the future of music and
business or music?
Live performance and music.
And have you deliberately asked that with a sort of pandemic?
Well, given that,
or are you asking just more generally beyond the pandemic?
Well, I think the pandemic, I not necessarily. I mean, I think the pandemic's relevant. I think that, like I say, that there's been a change in there will be a change in the landscape of music management, record labels. Now Spotify is basically in there now. Bandcamp's fighting really, really well against it. Mixcloud has suddenly started to get paid users, which is really good because Nickel started Mixcloud with a very altruistic idea of allowing DJs and radio stations to upload the mixes for free. Music's gone digital, and if live musicians are to have a place in the world in the future, given that we don't want to keep wheeling out Sting and Status Quo or Bon Jovi or
the arena fillers.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I know that Ed Sheeran is very popular, but I'm not a fan, and it worries me that he's considered to be in the upper echelons of live musicians in the world. I think that's a big shame.
I've got an alternative view on Ed Sheeran, right? So I'm not into Ed Sheeran's music. That's not my thing at all. But you know what? Like at that level of pop of, you know, inoffensive, not easy listening, but you know what I mean. That level of kind of real, just like pop.
Dross.
Man, Ed Sheeran is one of the best products to ever come out in that genre. Like, if you think of all those countless boy bands that, you know, like take that and just dross, like there are people that can't sing, can't dance, who haven't got any game, who are just basically like some little teeny models who, you know, who lip sync to whatever, and the music shit as well. It wasn't even good music. That's what used to occupy that space, man. That's what used to occupy that space. And I would much rather have Ed Sheeran occupying that space than take that. I'd much rather have Adele occupying that space than
Spice Girls.
Spice Girl, fucking hell, man.
Oh, I know,
mean, that
mate.
stuff's evil. That stuff's literally just evil. So and the fact they tried to portray that as like some positive influence on women, off, right? Yeah. So Ed Sheeran's a positive influence, man. He is, and Adele's a positive influence because they're authentic people. They're authentic. They're authentic in their pop, and that's fine. And that's what it comes down to. It's authenticity, and I'm all right with that. And you know what? They're hugely talented as well. You can't knock that. Like Adele's got an insane voice, and Ed Sheeran's an insanely good musician. He is. I mean, if you look at his early stuff, like when he was doing all the stuff with the loop, you know, all his early YouTube videos where he's doing all the, you know, looping his voice and stuff like that. You know, he was doing that way before Katie Tunstall and all those guys hyped it. You know, so he's an innovator in his lane. He understands his lane. I'm pop. I'm not going to step outside that lane. Well, he did with grime, and I didn't think that was very successful at all. And I'm power to him. So I don't like the music, but I'd much prefer to see an Ed Sheeran than a Vanilla Ice or a Spice Girls or whatever. So I'll give him props for that, man. That's who he is. He's doing
very good answer that. And like in terms of his loop pedal, right? Which, you know, sorry Ed, let's give you some credit. But there's a guy called Rico Loop who's played a couple of my events. He is incredible with a loop pedal and various other ways of using his voice. And like you say, I kind of agree. Like, is it better to have, you know, someone who was a busker as the most paid and most supported, you know, male artist in the world, or
proper musician,
Boyzone? Like, I think the only reason that Boyzone or Take That slightly avoid the comparison is because there were like 4 or 5 of them. It's just ridiculous. It's like one idiot is enough. Like, but if there's 5 of you, it's almost too much to compute. It's just
but also the thing I don't like about those guys, they're not musical. That's not music, bro. That's a mathematical formula, right? What was the mathematical formula in those days? It was always, all right, we've got a guy that can sing, like he's a serious talent. You know, but Gary Barlow's a talent. Let's be honest. The guy knows how to write music. The guy can belt a tune out and he can play the piano, whatever. And then, albeit in a kind of pub kind of way. and who's the other one? You got.
That's the best description. That's the best description of Gary Barlow I've ever heard. Ronan Keating. Look,
you can see Gary Barlow in a pub and he will blow your mind. But you know.
Yeah.
And then Ronan Keating, the guy can sing, right? The guy can sing.
But I don't.
And what it is, they haven't got the full package, right? Gary Barlow, and I'm not saying you have to be good looking to be in music, but he wasn't the best looking dude in the world, and he didn't have any game either. He didn't have some swag around him to get, you know, he was just a musician, and there was nothing really interesting outside of that. Which in that genre in pop music, unfortunately, you need. And then same thing with Ronan Keating. I think, you know, all right, I think some girls find him good looking or whatever, but I think he was just a bit of a wet biscuit, a bit limp. He wasn't that interesting, right? So what they have to do then, they have to make up for that deficit with all the other guys. And what they do is they tick the box. So they go, okay, we got the talent, so we got the music sorted, right? And he's going to make all the money, and the other guys work. Then what we need the rugged, good-looking one. So that was what the Shane in Boyzone. How do I know so much about this?
Do you know what? I'm really worried for you right now.
No, but analyze it. It's an analytical.
Yeah, but you run the risk of being able to name them all, which.
No, I can't name them all. And I'll tell you why I know Shane. I know Shane because one of the best bits of TV in history was the original Celebrity Love Island.
What, better than Flavor Flav and Orville?
Bruv, it's up there. It is up there, right? It had, I'm digressing. I'll come back to my point. But it had him. It had him, Sophie Anderton having a meltdown live on air, like she straight off her coke habit, whatever, just straight up just went nuts. Like how they let it happen at the time, I don't know, because like she fucking went nuts. And then they had Pierce Brosnan's son, who was a nobody but turned out to be hilarious. And then they had Lee from Hollyoaks, who again went off the rails, did a Sophie Anderson, just went nuts. And it was just the perfect thing, man. And Shane was funny. Shane was so funny with him and Sophie Anderton. Like he was just like sending a loopy. Anyway, go watch that because it's one of the best pieces of television ever after the Flav series. But anyway, going back to my point. So you got the musician who unfortunately hasn't got it all enough to become famous. So then we'll bring the good-looking guy or the rugged one, whatever. We'll bring the gay one in to capture the gay crowd, and then we'll bring the loser. There's always a loser who's the fool guy to make the others look even better than they actually are, right?
The short guy, yeah, the guy who's shorter than everyone. Right?
Yeah, the Anthony Costa of Blue, I don't know, this is where I don't know the names, right? There's always one, right? And he's always the one that the grandma feels sorry for and she likes, so that, yeah, right. And that was their formula. It's a fucking mathematical formula. And then what they do is they add other bits to that mathematical formula. We'll all sit down in chairs, and when there's a key change, we'll stand up. You know what I mean? It's like, mate, it's a formula. They just keep running the same shit. They did it with Spice Girls as well. You know what I mean? And that's not music, bro. Music is not a formula. Music is not a formula. So the reason why I like Ed Sheeran and Adele is they're not formulas. They're not formulaic. They're proper musicians. They might not break new ground or anything like that, but you know what I mean? Like, go and listen to what Ed Sheeran did with what's that kid, the famous Canadian kid? Sorry, I touch.
Justin Bieber.
Yeah, Bieber. That tune he did with Bieber
I've not heard it.
Mate, it's a fucking work of art. I'll tell you that. As a pop musician, it's a work of art.
I've probably played it at quite a few weddings, but I don't know what it is.
Probably a bit sad for weddings. It's quite horrible. But
is it?
Like,
right, okay.
Yeah, going back to my original point. It's complementary. It's got every part is meant to be there and complements other parts, and and the song becomes bigger than the sum of its parts, and that is a legendary tune. So look, anyway, yeah, fuck boy bands, man. They're evil. Evil. She all right?
Thank you for your patience. Yeah, she is all right. Yeah. Yeah. You know, she's obviously a disabled dog.
Mm.
And she's old now as well. She's about 14. So.
Oh, shit. That's old for a dog, yeah.
Yeah. Getting about is becoming. At times, you know, you see her trying to get around the house and she's just on her front two.
Mm.
She must have really strong shoulders, you know, just dragging her behind. But she's soldiering on. And previous to living here, what you can see around you is a house that we moved into 1 year ago.
Mm.
And I'll be honest and say it's kind of like my dream. You know, it's like everything I could ever have imagined having in Ibiza, to somewhere to live, somewhere that no one's going to, you know, kick me out of, somewhere that we've got a studio and Nell's got her own.
Shit. Mate, I'm coming to visit.
You definitely. Yeah. But we've got loads of, we're in this little corner, the southwest corner of the island, a little place called Calacarbo. And I don't know if you know the rock that is just off the south of Ibiza called Esvedra. It's like on lots of postcards. It's like the picture perfect. Yeah.
Go on, sorry, keep going. I'm looking it up. Esvedra, yeah?
Yeah.
And that's where you live, overlooking that?
Not overlooking it, but just about 5 minutes from it. I can walk up behind my house and then, you know, a little five minute trot and I can see that.
It's like
that's it. Yeah. Yeah.
Nice,
and Esvedra is apparently in is it Homer's Odyssey, where Odysseus travels around the Mediterranean and then he gets tempted off of his by the sirens. He moves his boat towards land because he sees these sirens on a rock, and it ends up shipwrecking him. That is apparently Esvedra. That is the rock.
There you go.
Yeah,
steeped in mythology.
Yes, yeah. You could read a lot of. Some of it is frankly bullshit, but it is a very beautiful place. So let's get back on. Let's get back onto topic, right? So we've been talking a lot about recorded music, and we've been talking a lot about hip hop and culture, things like that. We started off talking about you as a musician. Quick question: what is the best live gig you've ever been to?
CeeLo Green.
CeeLo Green. Okay.
Probably the worst gig as well, and the best gig.
How
what
so?
I mean by that. So for some reason, there was a good reason. I can't remember what it was now. No one turned up. There was a reason. Like either he switched the date and then didn't promote the second date unless you were a big follower of CeeLo Green. And so this, by the way, this is before CeeLo Green was famous. Like,
yeah, right.
All right. So let me take that back. Obviously, he was famous for Goody Mob, but that was very much really an American thing. It wasn't massive over here. And then this is before CeeLo Green, the Forget You, Fuck You, the #1 track, and Pussycat Dolls productions and all those kind of things, right? So this is, no one really knew about him in England. So here was a guy that no one knew in England. They promoted him and they switched the date last minute and then didn't promote the second date. I turned up. I think there was 12 of us in the crowd at the Astoria.
At the Astoria?
yeah. 12 people.
Oh,
sorry, was that the Astoria? Yeah, no, the Astoria, yeah.
That's an expensive night for the venue, isn't it?
Yeah, tell me about it, right? But this guy, consummate musician, he's old school, isn't he? Do you know what I mean? He comes from that kind of like, he could have been in the Oscar Peterson trio if he was born 30 years earlier or something, you know what I mean? He could have, he's a seriously talented musician. So the guy just gave the best performance you've ever seen, like it was a crowd of 40,000. And but it was an intimate gig for 12 people. And he was like, fuck it, he didn't throw a strop. He didn't go, oh, do you know what I mean? I'm going to run through the motions because no one's here. He just banged out the best gig, and his band was amazing as well because it was all proper musicians, and it was just such a undiluted, vibesy gig by someone who's ridiculously talented, without all the schmaltz that you normally see from gigs. It just affected me, man. It was cool, really good.
Yeah, I can imagine as well being in such a small crowd and witnessing musicians doing their thing. I mean, you don't often get an opportunity like that. I mean, that's almost like a kind of, sort of studio session, like to have, usually you would be sort of, crammed in, loads of people, some people are, barging you about, whatever, and the noise and everything, you don't really get that intimate experience. So that, I can quite imagine that being incredible.
Yeah.
Now,
so I was going to say the other thing that's interesting as well is I don't really enjoy gigs, I'll be honest. Like I had a bit of arrogance about me when I was younger. I was like, I'm going to be big, so I don't want to worship someone. I don't want to stand there and worship them, which
really?
I saw. I know this sounds super arrogant.
When did you think that? I mean, you've never said that to me. I mean,
well, we missed out on a few years, isn't it?
Right. Okay.
But yeah, I remember saying it. Someone said to me, "Why are you staying in the corner not dancing?" And there's a few reasons, right? First of all, a lot of gig music doesn't sound like the sound. I told you I'm big on Sonics. The sound doesn't sound good to me. I prefer it on a CD. So then, if it sounds better on a CD, what the gig's got to give me vibes. You've got to make up for the loss of sound quality with vibes, right? And by the way, I think gigs are a lot better these days. I think they're worse than the others. And just all the gigs too. I was just like, I don't know, man. I'm just like, it's bullshit, man. It's not what it should be. Except the CeeLo Green gig I went to was amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting you say that. I mean, and I have got another question to lead on, but
George Clinton as well. That was a good gig. That was a proper gig with lots of people, but that was good.
What, Parliament?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, that was good.
I've got a funny story about that. He came to Ibiza a few years ago, and do you remember that summit I was telling you about that happens every year? He was the kind of headliner for the after party. Anyway, before me and Nell got together, we've been friends for 11, 12 years, but we've only been a couple for 3 and a bit.
Oh shit!
She is an incredible singer. She was at that after party with George Clinton, so there's probably about 50 people there, dinner. But Nell's band had played just beforehand. So
she was supporting George Clinton. That's heavy.
Well, kind of, yeah. But she was at the front of the stage while he was performing, and there's a video of her, right? She's singing along, and he's right at the front, and she sort of, and this is exactly what she would do. She's kind of like beckoning him in to sort of give her the mic, and she took the mic off. She took the mic off him and got up on stage and just sang a little bit, sort of thing.
Oh,
yeah. No, she basically kind of, what would you call it? Like in DJ parlance, you call it rushing the decks. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like if you're not invited, it's not your set, but suddenly you turn up and you're like, get out of the way. So she kind of rushed the mic on George Clinton.
But it was cool. Like he was cool.
Yeah,
right?
he was. Yeah, I think he was a bit sort of flummoxed by it. But he certainly.
And normally those people are shit singers. He was probably like, "Oh."
That did work in her favor. Yeah.
That's a cool, man. That's a cool memory for her.
Yeah, she's got a few like that, you know. So you mentioned CeeLo Green as your most memorable, the best live gig you've ever seen. It's something I had on my list to talk to you about, which is that you've actually performed with an international famous band. I'm sure you've performed with more, but you performed with Boney M.
Boney M, yeah, still going strong. Yeah, that was an interesting gig. I'm trying to remember how I even got into it, man.
And you were in Asia as well, is that right? You were sort of, it wasn't in Europe.
To be honest, I had the option to kind of go full time with them. They, what did I do? I did Russia. I did Malaysia, and then I had the option to go on a 6-week tour of Australia as well. But I'd have had to give up my job. And also I didn't want to be a full-time keyboarder for Boney M. That wasn't, it was an awesome side gig, but I didn't want that to be my main gig.
So you're playing keyboards. How much? I mean, in terms of, I don't actually know who the original members of Boney M are, but if people aren't aware of who Boney M are, they released a tune called Rasputin or Rasputin, 78, 79. It was one of the biggest #1 hits around the world for a long time. And it basically sort of put disco on the map a little bit.
Rasputin.
Yeah, but it was
like the ABBA.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Yeah, it had that mass appeal, but in terms of its the band's credibility, Ma Baker is an amazing tune, and they had some really good disco tracks. A bit like Chic always get kind of remembered for Freak Out and I Want Your Love and stuff like that. But actually, Chic have got some brilliant tunes in it, and that late 70s disco sound. So did you feel comfortable there on stage? Was that kind of your fingers just like, yeah, I can do Boney M, no problem?
Yeah, because yes, the short answer is I feel comfortable, right? Because it's it's just playing the keyboard for a band. That's not particularly difficult. Yeah, I'm not front and center.
Yeah,
no one's looking at me. You know what I mean? As long as I hit the right notes, I'm cool. And for me, it was more of like a fun thing to do. I was traveling the world. And most of these gigs, they weren't every night. So you'd go for like, I think Malaysia was a week. We only did 2 gigs. Did one on New Year's Eve and one more gig. And the rest of the time I was, I got paid whatever I got paid. It was decent money for a young person and free travel and then have a holiday in Malaysia. In fact, I think I invited my girlfriend at the time, and we popped off to like a little desert island in between gigs. So I basically had a free holiday, performed with Boney M, which was a laugh, you know, something different, isn't it? It's an anecdote. And still came back with change in my pocket. I mean, what's not to like? It was just for a young kid. I mean, I was very young. It was awesome. Yeah. And Russia as well. Like Russia, oh man, I've got some stories. Like, yeah, I've got mad stories, man. Fuck.
Yeah, I mean, tell us. I mean, what I'm saying is, I've known you since we were about 5 years old, and I guess, you know, I've told you a little bit about how I've ended up doing something that I dreamed of doing. You know, that when I was 16, 17, it was a proper pipe dream, and you know, kind of, I can look back on my life now and think, well, I've actually kind of done that. You know.
Yeah, that's mine's not the same bracket as that. That for you is large. This wasn't that, man. You know what I mean? Boney M are more on the almost like a tribute act. They're not a tribute act because it's Boney M, but they're on that tribute act circuit. We weren't. Oh look, to be fair, when we went to Russia, yes, we did play 21,000 people. That was nuts. That was fucking nuts, right? I was like, oh my god, I'm on stage with like this many people.
21,000 people.
Yeah. That was crazy. But most of the gigs were just kind of like at the back of a hotel to, I don't know, 400 people or something like that, like private parties and that kind of thing. Yeah,
I know the sort of gig you're talking about. Like a lot of brilliant musicians have to divide their time between their personal creative projects and what pays the bills, and sometimes that isn't even music. You know, they have to pay the bills with something else. But if you had any aspirations or ambitions as a young musician to be on stage performing, I guess, with keyboards, what would it be? What would be your, you know, what would be the stage that you would love to play, or the band you would love to play with?
I don't know. I think I'm going to be awkward here. I have no aspiration to be a keyboarder in a band. Zero aspiration. Yeah. Like, you know what it was? When I was younger, like anyone, you want to be the star. I had an aspiration to be on stage as a rapper or whatever, as the star of the show. And then I didn't very quickly realize, but at some point I realized that wasn't where my natural talent lay. Like, I wasn't a natural performer on stage. You know, I didn't necessarily have that X factor. I didn't have the.
How do you mean? How do you mean by that? Like, in terms of your like posture or your performance or something?
Oh, whatever it is, like, you got to have something. You got, whether it's your voice or your delivery or skills or your persona or your image or your swag, whatever it is, you got to have like something that stands out a fucking mile, right? And even maybe I had that, and the thing I lacked was confidence, because you got to have that as well. So you see my point? There was something lacking, right? And most of the point, it wasn't so much that I was lacking, I was really bad, because I did, look, don't get me wrong, I did shows as a rapper and I did all right back in the day. But what I realized was actually I was pretty good at producing. I was good at music. Even as a keyboarder, I wasn't a good keyboarder. I was average, man. I was average. I could get by. I was a much better cello player. But I realized actually I was a pretty good producer. So I was like, and I think it was Dan Brewer said it to me one day. It was something about focus. Like, it's something he said he wanted to do. He wanted to focus more on this and not spread himself too thinly. And I was like, yeah, that's what I should do. I should just focus on what I'm good at and become really good at that. Because you don't get successful in music by being a jack of all trades. You really don't. You get successful by being the best in a particular genre, in a particular niche. And so, yeah, I wasn't a great keyboarder. I didn't want to dedicate my time to be a great keyboarder. I wasn't a great front man. I was okay. I didn't want to invest, because being a front man, it's all about authenticity, and you've got to like invest everything and be that and enter that, and, you know, put everything on the line. And I was a bit risk averse. I wasn't that either. So I was like, oh, I'm good at producing. Stick to that, man. I enjoy being behind the buttons. It's cool, and I enjoy it. I mean, there's an introvert side to my personality that I can fake my way out of, but I am a natural introvert, so it suits me to be behind the buttons.
Yeah. I mean, I know that about you. You're a very modest man, despite being very brilliant. I remember the girls around Greenwich would always just be like swooning whenever they saw you, because you were just so kind of like laid back and kind of like, you know, I'll play some music, that kind of thing.
I'm sorry, that doesn't answer your question. But
that's all right.
If I had to be a keyboardist for anyone in the world, Parliament.
Nice. With Bootsy or Prince. I saw Prince perform in the Indigo 2 club.
Yes, I went twice, bro.
I saw Carleen Anderson warmed up for him as well, Vicky Anderson's daughter. And
shit, I didn't see that.
Oh mate, like, because I didn't go to the big O2 gig, but do you remember Kenny from the Live Bar in Deptford? Do you remember there was that old bank at the top of Deptford High Street, and it was called the Live Bar. It used to have He-Man wallpaper in the gents.
Oh yes. I do remember.
Right.
Yeah. Near the Chinese shop.
Yeah. So it was owned by 3 guys, but when it shut down, Kenny ended up becoming the manager of Indigo 2. And funnily enough, one of the painters, Julian, who worked for the company that I was running, he was one of the bouncers. So it was one of those where Prince is only here for 20 days or something like that. I managed to get sort of, free, sort of get in there into the Indigo 2. And Carleen Anderson did a set. I think Beverly Knight as well. Really, really brilliant. Quite packed. No phones allowed. No cameras or phones. But there was this vibe that he might not turn up. You know what I mean? Like, it's a bit hanging in the balance. Will he bother? Will he not? And by the time he did, everyone was hammered because it was like 3 hours later. But he turned up, and then he played, his first sort of 45 minutes or something, and everyone was just like, "What the fuck?" And he brought out Maceo.
Oh, the solo
and the JB's,
with the long note.
The JB's horns. He brought out the horn section from the JB's, and I was
Parker.
Maceo Parker. I was standing there going, "I'm in Charlton."
I'm in Charlton. Yeah. When you break it down,
I can walk home. Macros is just
macro. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Mate, I totally remember. Do you know? Actually, I didn't go to the Indigo. I went to the main concert, and that. Do you know what? That would be almost up there with CeeLo, man. That was a heck of a gig, man. That guy is super talented.
Yeah. R.I.P.
Wow. Yeah. Did Maceo Park? So there was this bit in the middle of his show, because I'm guessing the Indigo was a bit more of an intimate gig, so maybe he played a different set. But there was a bit in the middle where he has a break in the O2 show, and Maceo Parker. He brought out Maceo Parker and the dudes earlier, but then Maceo plays through the interlude, and he plays "What a Wonderful World" by
Sam
Louis Armstrong.
Oh, Louis
Armstrong.
Okay.
Yeah, he plays "What a Wonderful World" by Louis Armstrong, solo on his saxophone. Mate, oh my goodness, like that was a goosebumps moment. Fucking hell. I'll send you the YouTube link. I watched the YouTube link again. I was like, it's still good. Yeah, he was. Oh man, unbelievable. I like almost upstage Prince. It's that good.
Well, I mean, like Prince was that confident that he was quite happy to have a musician of that quality on the same stage, and that showed actually what a lot of people didn't realize about Prince is his modesty. In a way, he was an exhibitionist,
He was a showman,
and a showman, but he was very he showed his vulnerability as well, but also his kind of animal magic as well. I mean, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've met women in my life, and some of them have confessed to having this kind of real attraction to Prince, even though they know that he's about 5 foot tall and he looks pretty strange. He looks like a Turkish barber or something, but he had this magnetism about him.
He's just like
sexuality.
consummately confident about everything he does, man. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Mate, I don't. By the way, I don't think that's limited to a few women, man. Women love Prince. If you're of a certain age from a certain era, man, fucking hell.
Yeah, but I mean, he would be shorter than most women, and he is tiny.
Yeah, but women don't function like us, dude. Like, we look at how women look, and that's kind of 80% of it. Like, women like power and competence, and when you're a bigger star as he is, that represents power. And when you're as good as he is, that's competence. Like, well, in terms of competence, he was off the charts. I can't think of many musicians that were better than him.
Yeah.
Like you said, he has Maceo Park on stage, and he still, doesn't get up stage. So, yeah, power and competence, man. Fuck what you look like. Do you know what I mean? That's what you need.
Yeah, I think a purple guitar helps as well.
Yeah.
Have you got any new instruments or gadgets that you are enjoying playing?
No, I scaled back actually.
So what do you use then? What's your kind of instrument setup?
So I mainly play everything through the keyboard, using samples or synths, or everything's digital in the plugin world. So I trigger that mainly with the keyboard, but I stripped everything back, because even the number of plugins I use and so on, because I sometimes think creativity can be stifled by having too much choice. And actually have less is more when it comes to creativity, because you're forced to be more creative when you limit the amount of things you can work with. So I stripped everything back, and I've got much fewer plugins. I just use a tiny little keyboard these days, this big. And then because I was so limited, I started using more recorded sound. So I might kind of like tap that on the table and record it with a shitty microphone, which will give it kind of some vibe, because it was a shit microphone with a reverb and stuff like that. Or I might get the cello out and just play a few notes on that and sample that. Yeah, just got a lot more creative with it.
So you still have a cello?
Yeah, still got a cello, bro. Yeah.
And do you know what? Because when we started talking about doing this, recording this podcast, which I'm so glad we got a chance to do tonight.
Yeah, it's been good.
You were telling me that you were moving from Dubai to Australia, but you've been living in Colombia as well in the last few years. Like,
no. Visiting. I only went there on holiday.
Oh, okay, sorry. But so the cello comes with you wherever you go?
Yeah, it does. It gets shipped.
Nice.
Yeah. Takes like 2 months to arrive every time.
Does it?
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty good. I've got there's a guitar up here that I bought Nell for our first anniversary. A Gretsch, 1972 Gretsch guitar, but
nice.
It ended up not arriving and being sent back to Germany, and then that took months, and then I got it sent to London, and she only just got it about 3 months ago. Took about 2 years to arrive.
Worth the wait.
Well, apparently, yeah, she does like it. Yeah, I've got a guitar that she gave me on my birthday years ago.
Do you play? I didn't know you play guitar. I
can play chords, and I've got the ability to sort of do a scale and potentially jam along to something that's quite slow. But I certainly don't. I don't have the. Yeah, at this moment in time, I couldn't perform live. But Nell thinks I'm all right. She thinks with more practice. But that was my issue. Like, when you mentioned the difference between a musician and someone else who's interested in music, it's like musicians love it and they practice and they spend that time getting better. It's about manipulation of your fingers, or if you play a woodwind instrument, it's about managing your diaphragm. If you've got a rhythm instrument, it's about joints and brain and stuff. I started learning Irish music to begin with, and I just didn't practice enough. I learned the fiddle, learned the tin whistle.
Dark horse.
Yeah. I mean, I can read music. I can see. I love music so much, and I listen to it with a real kind of. it's like if I'm not in a good mood, I don't want to listen to music. You know what I mean? It's kind of like I want music to be something that kind of brings something out of me. So when it comes to producing in Logic and things like that, a lot of what I do is very kind of solo-y, just a bit of a stream of consciousness, and then you go back and listen and take out all the dud notes and sort of maybe filter it down to something. I mean, I impress myself, and I've managed to impress some people, but it's definitely never, you can take a concept and an instrument, and the phases of the bars, and when certain instruments need to come in and out, when things need to come up, when things need to go down, like the middle eights and stuff, and then the fade outs. That instinctively. Now, I know that because I've listened to tunes, but I cannot, or I haven't so far, been able to look at a Logic project and say, well, actually, my thing goes on 3 feet, and that has to be the end of the tune. How do you get that into there? That's my limitation.
I think it's. I'll be honest. I think in my sort of career as a producer, or career is the wrong word. Yeah, no, career. Fuck it. In my career as a producer, I would say the last skill that I learned, and the one I found hardest, was arrangement. And it doesn't sound like it should be hard. But that's because arrangement is even much more than just, the blocks of 4, blocks of 8, wherever that pattern. That's part of the arrangement. But actually, just as much, and even more so, particularly in hip hop, is how you transition. The way you transition from one 8-bar loop to another 8-bar loop is key. Is so key. And then the way you transition the next 8 bars to the next 8 bars, if you use the same transition as this transition, your ears and your brain are clever. They're like, nah, bruv, nah, you loop that. Do you know what I mean? It takes a lot of attention to detail. For me, it's the equivalent of if you're a fashion designer or something. Those attention to details, the fact that you kind of use a slightly different color thread on one of the buttons, or the fact that maybe you put a flowery inlay on the suit on the inside that no one sees. But that attention to detail is what people pay for. That's a signal, a sign of quality and attention to your art and craft. And it's the same with music, man. Like the arrangement and the ability to arrange is a completely underrated skill, and it thoroughly transforms music. You can have a very, very good tune. If it's not properly arranged, unfortunately, it won't be a hit, and it won't go anywhere. And you could, it'll sound good when you play someone the loop, for 10 seconds. They'll be, oh man, that's heavy, that's fucking heavy, blah, blah, blah. And then you release the whole tune and it doesn't do anything. And it's because the arrangement wasn't right. So it's a very, very underrated skill. And I found it really hard to pick up. I had to sort of force myself to learn it. And I still don't think I cracked it, but I'm better. A lot better.
Yeah, I find that the only chance I've got is to sort of mimic tracks that I like.
The best way, bro. The best way to do it.
It's just sort of analyze it and go, that's what, there's a great track by Sylvester called Someone to Love, or Somebody to Love. Do you know that track? And it just starts with this just dirty bass. And we're talking like gay New York underground disco, you know what I mean? Really amazing bass line. And then this so like a kind of train track sort of sound starts. And then, the rhythm starts to come in, the different levels. And I've listened to it so many times, and I just thought, do you know what, right? I'm never going to make something that good. But that's kind of the build-up that I'd like to generate with some idea. So take that, play the bass line roughly, loop it, find the roughly, get them in the right place, and then start swapping the sounds around. And that feels to me like it's a bit like how I make websites. You know what I mean? I'm not a web designer, or what I mean? Of course. Yeah, I taught myself how to do HTML. But it's all based on taking a template that exists and then just substituting in and subtracting from it. I think that's quite a good model for learning anyway. I think that's kind of how people are educated in school. We're just not given it in those terms, in a sense. It's kind of, and nowadays it's so easy for young people to find out knowledge and to find facts out. I had a conversation in one of these recordings talking about, the modern era and the idea of truth and what is fact and what isn't. And I really hope the next generation of music lovers do recognize the sort of people we've been talking about in this conversation and realize that they can take that music, listen to it, study it, and then very simply replicate it, subtract, add, blah, blah, blah. It's a style of innovation. I think it's an entry point for people like me.
You know what, you used two words there I thought was interesting to use in the same sentence, which was one was replicate, one was innovate. I think doing what you're doing there, by the sounds of it, you're not just replicating, you're evolving it, you're innovating, if you like. You're saying this is the building block, but now I'm gonna, embellish that to make it more Ian. And I think it's a really valid production technique. I really do. And there's a beautiful thing in there as well, which is I'm not talking about you specifically now, me, anyone, any producer. There's your inability to perfectly replicate it, which is a wonderful thing, because if you could replicate it, what have you achieved? Like you haven't achieved anything. You've copied someone, you traced the drawing, if you like. But if you inaccurately replicate it because of your lack of ability to replicate it, your skills or your availability of instruments, whatever it is, you'll make some mistakes that will become part of the artistic product. And you'll make a mistake, go, oh shit, that sounds good, and then it's yours. And there's a serious buzz. I don't know about you. Do you get this? When you do that and you start, you stumble upon something and you're like, this is good, man. And that like, boom, I'll stay up to 3 a.m. to finish that tune. You know what I mean? Like, I get a real buzz off that, a real kick of kind of stumbling on something by accident. I didn't intend to do it, but it happened and it sounds amazing.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think, like I said, when I try and make stuff on the keyboard and it's soloing, there's bound to be mistakes. I'm going to make mistakes. Well, they're not mistakes because I don't know what I'm trying to do. It's not a mistake if you're not trying to hit something. But if you're trying to replicate something and you get it slightly wrong, right? It's much easier for someone else to try and copy the original than it is for them to try and copy your mistake. So your mistake then becomes more original. And there's nothing to say that, mistake is only subjective, man. It's just like your opinion. That can become, like you say, like an offbeat or, like a flat note and stuff like that. These suddenly become, it's a beautiful thing. In fact, I mean, I don't know how, we're going to have to wrap this up pretty soon, but that's a really interesting conversation to have with someone like you about the creative process being free, but adopting a starting point from somewhere, whether it's a template from another tune, or it's an idea in your head, or it's a sample, or it's a beat, or it's a feeling or whatever. But the creative process not becoming a nuisance to the producer because it's not quite right or it's not quite exact enough. That is a drawback, isn't it? That's inertia. Really, the starting point is good, and then freedom and mistakes and everything being incorporated, I think, is a much healthier way to look at it. And one of our guests, Paul Nolan, who hasn't recorded yet, Paul, but will be, does a great podcast on the fear of failure. It's called Make Your Transition, the fear of failure for creative people. How to approach this idea that you're not quite doing exactly what you think you should be, or you know, your expectations are such that it doesn't sound like that DJ that played that tune. It doesn't sound like that piece of music that I'm trying to copy. And that then becomes a negative part of the creative process, which is you could do without.
But I think here, I'm going to take one stage further. If you think that's a negative part of the process, I know you don't, like, that's why we're talking about it. It's a good thing. But if you do think that's a negative part of the process, I don't think you can call yourself, I think you'll struggle to call yourself an artist, because fundamental to artistry is, yes, craft and being able to do what you want to do to a certain level of quality and so on. That's important. But also exploration is just as important. Just as important is to explore and discover and find and develop and learn and all those things. They're central to creativity, because if you don't have those things, then all you're really doing is echoing the past, and you might as well be a tribute band, you know, which is music. Don't get me wrong, but it's not artistry.
Not creativity. Do you know what? I think sometimes it's really difficult to work out how to sign these things off, but I think that is a really profound thing you said.
It's a good spot to sign out, huh?
Yeah, encourage experimentation and creative freedom.
Yeah.
I think.
What have you got to lose? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Hours of your life. That's it.
Do you know what, as well? Because I've been mentoring some young creatives in different fields. One's an artist, one's a dancer. I basically sort of hatched this plan a few years ago that I would offer my advice, not unsolicited. I would just say, look, I'm a sounding board if you want, to young creatives for free. So free consultancy.
Like mentoring sort of thing.
Yeah, kind of. But it's only as much as they want. You know what I mean? It's not like, right, you have to sign up to this program and every week you must do your homework. But what I have said to them is that you can't really stop being enthusiastic or having interest in that type of creativity, because you've already sparked it off. I mean, you can fall out of love with things. I mean, you know, and you can move on to other things and stuff, but there'll be this sort of creative font, this energy that will keep bubbling up like a volcano or something, you know, that if you try and stick a cork in it, it's just gonna come up later. And one of the things that I think puts young creatives off is the striving for some kind of perfection or for creating something that fits with a zeitgeist or fits with a culture, you know, that is there's a conscious end point to it. And I think that is one of the biggest things to try and remove from a young creative's mind.
100%. Yeah, I mean, you should end it right there. That's a beautiful way of putting it. And do you know what? If you want to take this full circle, you asked me a question about grime, and I think I didn't answer the question because then we went off on a tangent about what I thought about grime. And I wasn't into grime when it first came out. But when I look back at some of the grime that I wasn't into, that I struggled to, you know, just to understand, let's say, because as you said, some of the beats were just like, I wouldn't put it there. It sounds a bit off to me, like whatever. This is the earlier stuff, because I think the later grime actually came a bit closer to hip hop in terms of where they put their beats. The beautiful thing about what those guys were doing is they were exploring and discovering on our time. So they weren't exploring, discovering, perfecting, and then selling us the music. They were selling us their exploratory phase. And what it did was put them in their own lane, because like they didn't sound like anyone else. That music didn't sound like anything else. And you either loved it or you hate it. If you didn't like it, fine, move on, find some other music. But if you liked it, you had to come to them. They were the only guys doing it. They were the pioneers. You couldn't compare them to anyone. You know, even like great people like Prince, you know, at the end of the day, there's people you can compare Prince to. There are. He does funk music, right? There's loads of people who do funk music. He does it very well. But you can compare him. You can't compare Wiley's first album to anything. Even grime, man. Like that Esky Beats was different.
Yeah.
And And that's why that music ended up being so powerful. That's why it was, because it was more than just music. It was artistry, man. And people respected. There were enough people, kids and in the area, who respected someone who was willing to go out there and take risks creatively, and back themselves. And that's why that was the only reason grime grew. Grime wouldn't have grown without that level of commitment to artistry by Wiley. So yeah, that might be a nice point to end on, because I think you made a very, very powerful statement. Very powerful statement. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
there's nothing to fear. There's nothing to fear.
Nothing to fear. You're absolutely right, and it is a good point to end on, because I've expressed in our conversation how I wasn't that really turned on by grime music, but you're absolutely right. Experimentation is so key to generating a creative legacy, and there's nothing wrong with it just because it was popular and just because I heard it. That's irrelevant. It's what they were doing, and if it encouraged other young people to follow a path into creative arts, be it lyricism, be it writing music, or whatever else, then that's a good influence. You know,
it's an amazing influence. I mean, be under no illusion, right? I've got no doubt in my mind. Without grime, you wouldn't see the level of success that sort of British. I put grime in the British hip hop category. You know, it's rap music, right?
Yeah.
So British hip hop would not be in the position it is now, where, you know, the likes of H are getting 50 million views, Skepta's selling out tours in the US, and all these guys. There's loads of them, right, getting massive hits. They would not be in that position without grime. They wouldn't, because they all built off that. Drill as well. You know, drill is evolved from grime. And the problem, unfortunately, and you might disagree on this, and if you do, we'll back to the second podcast. But the Rodney P's. Yeah, the Rodney P's and I'd love to do another. Rodney P's and the Black Twangs, don't get me wrong, right? Skill-wise, everything they're doing, I really liked at the time. But there was something about, and I think you said this as well, there was something about their music that was still anchored in there were elements of American culture in the music. It wasn't their accent, obviously, but their flow, you could argue, that kind of the fact that the beats were 4/4 or 2/4, that comes from America. America hip hop was 4/4 2/4. It was 4/4. When you hear grime was like, we ain't 4/4, man, we're 2-step. And so, you know what I mean? That it was this is fucking British, you know what I mean? And I think that emancipation, grime afforded British hip hop the chance to emancipate and develop and become British hip hop, because I don't think it was British hip hop before. It was British people over American beats.
That's good words.
I've overgeneralized. Don't get me wrong.
No, I think that's.
But you could put America. You could take a Jess beat. I love Jess, brother. I flipping love Jess. They call me the Big Lebowski, part-time alky, scrambling around. I mean, the guy's a genius, right? Scrambling around for his house key. And Rodney P and Black Twang I really like as well. Or like a Savloy and all that. It's just genius stuff, right? But the problem is you could take them off that record and put an American guy on top of it, and it would work. It would work. And that's what I mean by it is an American derived beat. You couldn't put an American on a grime beat. It's ours, you know?
Yeah.
So, and that's why we're doing so well now, because Americans can't do our beats, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and you know, drum and bass is probably 15, 17 years old now, and that was another form of music the Americans could never copy, you know? It's ours.
Who is more creative than Britain right now in music? Like, in the space of the 40 years we've been alive, right? We've seen, jungle / drum and bass, garage,
acid house.
Did Acid House come out before?
86 Acid House.
Yeah, 6 years old.
New Romantics and kind of punky stuff.
Punk. I mean, I know the Americans claim punk, but fuck it, we pioneered it. And grime and drill. Let's add drill to this, because that's the. I know drill's kind of that has bastardized some of the American stuff, but to have 6 distinct genres like that in 40 years that we've been alive, how many of the Americans come up with, man?
I mean, and if you go into the house sort of umbrella, you can pick a few others as well.
But I think then you're almost slicing and dice and kind of.
Yeah.
I think we're a super creative bunch, man. The kids in Britain are just phenomenal.
Yeah. So kids out there in Britain, listen to Uncle Dan over here. He knows what he's talking about. Listen, let's wrap it up, man.
Cool.
I'm getting a bit hoarse.
I really enjoyed that though, dude.
Yeah, me too. It's really nice seeing you, mate. A bit, getting a chance to connect. You're looking really well. I hope it looks like family life is treating you well. Mm-hmm. So just as a kind of sign off, this is Daniel Demilew. Thank you very much, Dan. You've been listening to the Nothing to Gain podcast, is what it's called.
I'm going to tune in. I'm a fan.
Yeah. There are some really interesting people coming on here, like yourself. Cool. So I'm going to wrap it up there, and maybe we'll have to arrange a part 2.
Let's do it, man. Take care of yourself. Been great chatting to you, bro.
All right. Big love. Night.